Blah 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 blah. Hello everybody and welcome to I'll Tell You What TV with myself, Dave Palin. I've also got some bloke, I've known him for a while, his name's Steve I think it is, and this other geezer who got hold of a microphone one time and just never let it go. That would be James Shaw. Evening guys, how are you?
Evening, not too bad.
So, what are we doing? I'll tell you what. Well, I'll tell you what. It's something that we thought. Go on.
I'm going to keep count.
Oh yeah, there's no point. It's something that James. I mean, you actually mentioned something you wanted to do a long time ago, wasn't it? Some kind of podcast to talk about F1 and just stuff about life, wasn't it?
Aye. Well, the amount of times where you watch some on race and then you listen to pundits that are getting paid to actually be at these events and stuff, and you just sat there and you're thinking, where's my voice? And so this is it. We're getting it out there, getting everybody's thoughts out there, and we want to hear from people and see if we're on the same wavelength.
That we do. Now, we have got an I'll Tell You What YouTube channel, but we've got the first show, the pilot episode, on my own YouTube channel, which I will download and then upload it to the I'll Tell You What YouTube channel. So for anyone that enjoys listening to what we're going to waffle on about for however God knows how long, check out the description because the link to the new YouTube channel is in there, and obviously that's where we'll do our live streams from in future. So basically, people are going to want to know what's the format of the show. Well, there isn't really much of a format, but we have got a few basic bits of information. What are they, you might wonder? Well, I tell you what, check this out and you'll see. The format of the show. Well, it's an F1 based podcast discussing many things Formula 1, and we each come to the show with 3 F1 based topics to discuss, plus 3 secret non-F1 topics to discuss where almost anything goes. Viewers can ask questions live or by sending questions to us via YouTube, email or Facebook, and a little warning that there may be swearing and bad language on the shows. Okay, so that's the base format of the podcast. We're each come to each show with 3 F1 based topics that's open for discussion that we've shared with each other, so we've got a bit of an insight of what's coming. But the bit that scares me is the 3 secret non-F1 topics. Basically with that, it's a case of, right, you can bring up pretty much anything, almost anything. It can be a question, it can be a have you seen this, it can be pretty much anything, and we don't tell each other what those things are, which I must admit has got me quaking in my boots a little bit. There's one rule to that though, is if you're going to ask a question, you've got to be willing to answer it yourself. And for the viewers, if you do want to ask us questions, whether it be F1 related or even non-F1 related, feel free to do so. Seeing as we're talking about F1, there's only one place that really you can start your career towards Formula 1, and that's go-karting. And you know what? I saw something rather cool today, and I'm going to quickly show it on the screen here. And I'll tell you what, that's cool. It's a 2-seater go-kart. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm sharing this with the viewers, and I'm sharing this with Steve and James. I mean, Steve and James, you see a 2-seater go-kart, what's your first thought?
Who's got the brakes?
There needs to be a cartoon character driving it.
Well, I don't know if the person who sent me the picture is going to appreciate you saying that, but they're going to get to hear this. Well, the picture was sent in the Front Row Racing chat room by one of the fellas called Niels Wren, otherwise known as Bleeding Sunrise. Did some commentary with us last season, and he posted it and said, I took my disabled brother go-karting today, and I saw it and I was like, I tell you what, that's cool for a number of reasons, right? I mean, I've chatted a little bit with Niels. His brother, unfortunately, Patrick, is heavily disabled. But obviously, from the look of the picture, he likes the idea of going around a racetrack. Unfortunately, he can't do it himself, so what does his brother do? He says, I'll take you to where there's a two-seater go-kart and I'll take you around the track. Knowing Niels, he probably crashed it as well. But I think that is absolutely amazing, and quite a few people commented saying, you know what, I've never seen anything like that in the UK. And for anyone that's in Holland, you can find it at the Kartplaza in Nijverdal. I've said that wrong, but there we go. In the Netherlands. But I think that's really cool. What about you guys? I mean, is it something that, I mean, A, you would love to have a go in, and B, your thoughts of, like, as a brother, being able to take your brother on that kind of situation. Experience, yeah, that was the word I was looking for.
James, what do you reckon?
Well, we're not gonna get deep here, but I had a brother who unfortunately died when he was a kid. Now, if he'd have lived, he would have probably been heavily disabled. But just being able to give somebody that experience that people who are able-bodied can just do naturally and not worry about anything. Just to give somebody that experience who probably, for the majority of their life, would not be able to.
Yeah. And I tell you what, James.
I'm all for it.
I'm not gonna go deep. You went deep straight off the bat. Bosh. I feel for you though, man. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. Let's put it that way. It's cool. And you know what? In the future episodes, if we find stuff that's cool, we may feature those as well. Okay, Formula One. That's what we're here to sort of chat mainly about. So, guys, we've all got 3 topics. James, why don't you tell the viewers and us what one of your topics is that you want to discuss, whether it be from the latest Formula One race at Spa or anything at all to do with F1?
Yeah, well, I'll start, but I'm just going to let all the viewers know there may be a few choice words that I will kick off with. So, number one, main thing from Spa for me, watching that race, even though it was exciting to watch at the same time, Perez, number one, that's me. Just, for me, Perez utter disgraced himself last time out in Spa. That's my first one.
I don't know what you mean, James. What did he do?
Well, the first one, I've got to say, I was a bit like, well, it's 3-1. There's going to be contact. On the run down to Eau Rouge, we had Hulkenberg on the left-hand side, overtaking Perez, who was in the wrong engine mode in the middle of the road. His teammate on the right. If I was in Perez's shoes, I'd have just stayed directly in the centre of the road. If you're not 100% sure, I would never dream of moving across, because looking to your right-hand side, that's not enough room for a car. It ended up, luckily, both of them getting away unscathed, but that could have been a disaster, and that was on lap 1.
It really could have been. I mean, that one I saw it as like, okay, you kind of let that one go a little bit, got lucky. Ocon got ever so lucky on the run down to Eau Rouge at the start of the race. And at the start of the race, 3 wide, there's a lot going on. That kind of thing can happen. The second one, though.
That, for me, I turned to my dad and I said, he needs a black flag. That was completely, number one, the team. He bangs on about the team and says everything and goes, well, the team think this, the team think that. He has quite clearly shown that he gives not one flying monkey about the team.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, though, James, because you think back to when he had his year at McLaren.
I was going to say this.
Why was it only 1 year? And it's got to be something to do with his personality. His driving speaks for itself.
McLaren actually did say, sometime after he left, McLaren did say that one of Perez's biggest problems was his attitude. And at the time, I was like, oh, well, maybe it's just because he's young. But no, it's creeped in over the course of this season. The impetulance. I mean, what was it, Baku? I think it was Baku. If he'd have just let Ocon through, both drivers score good points. No, Baku, they had a couple of collisions. But there's been a few instances this season where if Perez lets Ocon through, the team score good points. If Perez is behind Ocon, he's moaning like a baby. And I'm just thinking, I mean, I have this thought of, if you're faster, catch up and overtake. All right? If you catch up and can't do anything, don't go screaming. If it's your teammate, there's nothing wrong with saying to your team bosses, look, guys, at this stage of the race, I'm faster, can you let me through? And if they want to, they can. And something I'll touch on with that is, there's a lot of people moaning about what Mercedes did with Hamilton and Bottas at Hungary, right? I admire what Mercedes did, and I admire Lewis Hamilton more than probably anything else he's done in his career. The fact that he still gave that position back. There was no argument. He kept his word. There was no argument. And that basically said to every other team, if your drivers don't do this, we don't want them. And you look at Perez, and he's totally on the opposite end of the scale. But not only that, the situation in Spa, I mean, okay, squeeze a rival, but you don't squeeze your teammate into the secondary.
What was the penalty that Schumacher had when he squeezed? Was it Massa up towards the wall in Hungary?
Barrichello.
Yeah. I mean that was frowned upon, and yet
there was no contact.
There was no contact, but what is the difference other than maybe 20, 30 miles an hour extra of speed?
I think what Perez, the one with Schumacher and Barrichello, that was dangerous, no doubt about it. And I think Schumacher actually did say sometime afterward, he did look at it and go, yeah, that was a bit bad. This one was just Perez, he knew exactly what he was doing.
As well, with Schumacher and Barrichello, as close as it was, I think that was a misjudgment from Schumacher. And he probably thought there was a little bit more room. And there was literally the space for a Formula 1 car and 2 centimetres. That's how close it got.
Like his misjudgments with Villeneuve, like his misjudgments with Damon Hill and parking.
No. I know Schumacher could be as dirty as you come. But what Perez did, I watched it back. I watched the race back yesterday, just so I were fresh and knew what I was talking about today, as I usually don't. But you can see on the run down to Eau Rouge, you can see that wall on the right hand side. You're on board with Ocon. You can see Perez on the left, and he's squeezing. And even at the point where the contact is, he's still squeezing. Ocon's got about 3 centimetres on the right before the wall, and Perez's right rear tyre is pretty much right in front of Ocon's front left tyre. Now, that's clearly not enough space, and it just showed to me that he's not only willing to sacrifice the team points, he's willing to sacrifice somebody's life in order for himself to look quite good. And I personally thought that was disgusting.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, I think there's a couple of aspects to this. Obviously, one is what happened on the track. The second is the reaction on the radio of Ocon, which I've heard it, and I must admit, I thought it maybe a little exaggeration, but at the same time, is actually kind of right. And the third part is what has happened after the race. Okay, personally, I think it's disgusting that Ocon has come out publicly, Perez has come out publicly, and they're having an argument over Twitter about it, right? That, for me, that kind of situation, I think the team have done the right thing, because they've now said, look, we're not going to let you race each other anymore, and they're right to do that, because Perez has made it too dangerous. It's happened too many times. But I think the team should also have got their drivers together straight after the race, locked them in a room and said, right, nobody leaves until we sort this out. Nobody says anything publicly. Nobody goes being a mardy cow on Twitter or wherever you want to do it. You keep it in-house and you deal with it.
I would have done that in Canada. I wouldn't let it get to this stage.
Yeah.
What's going to happen, though, next time you've got one guy behind another and the team has said, we're not going to let you race each other, does that mean the team is going to give no orders and they have to understand that you don't overtake your teammate? Or is it the team says, don't overtake your teammate, or the team clearly says the other way around, you've got to let him through? But I can imagine Perez still won't let him through.
Well, I think the team they must. I would guess that there's probably something in their contracts that says we'll let you race up to a point. If it becomes dangerous, then this part of the contract comes into play, which is team orders will be given. You must apply to them. So the team will legally be able to say, right, Perez, let Ocon through. If you don't, you're getting fines. You're not driving. Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And as bad as it might appear to be for Force India or Formula One or Perez or Ocon, if you are Mercedes or Ferrari and you're looking around the grid at potential drivers and this is happening with Perez and he's not listening to team orders, you're not going to take him on, are you? Vettel's not going to agree to have Perez as his teammate, is he?
No.
The only way Perez will stay in Formula One after this season is by going to cars further down the order, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think Perez, because he brings so much finance into Force India, he slightly believes that because he's propping that team up, that it can pretty much do what he wants.
I don't necessarily think it's that, though, because of what happened at McLaren. He was okay. He brought a bit of money, McLaren, but McLaren didn't really need it. But from what I gather, he was pretty much the same. So I see where you're coming from. He might be that kind of Maldonado. Look, I'm not writing everybody off. I'm fine. Take my money. I think a lot of it is just it's Perez's attitude, and it's come out a lot this season. I mean, the thing is, you look at it. You look at when Ricciardo was against Vettel in that first season at Red Bull. Ricciardo was brilliant. Vettel was struggling. What happened to Vettel? Got mardy, didn't he? Got angry, didn't like it. And it might be a similar situation with Perez. This new guy's come along, and to begin with, he wasn't troubling him. But all of a sudden, he starts getting a bit quicker. He starts getting into the groove of things. And on a few occasions, has been catching him up in the race. And it's got to be said, Perez has cost Force India points recently. So again, put it in comparison to Hamilton, Bottas and Mercedes, with their switch around, people say, oh, they lost Hamilton 3 points. No, they didn't. Hamilton never had those 3 points. He only got the opportunity to potentially have them because Bottas and the team allowed him to go through. So he never lost anything. But I said to you at the time, didn't I, Steve? I said, that'll do Hamilton and Mercedes a world of good in the public relations type of thing and as a perspective. And it's something we've seen in many forms of racing where a teammate will say, can you let me through? If I can't get past the guy, I'll let you come back past. And they do it no problem and all's happy and all's jolly. But Perez, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to like doing that, and neither do other teams. I mean, you go Vettel and Raikkonen at Hungary. Ferrari, really, for PR, should have let Raikkonen attack Vettel and go past him and go and win the race. Raikkonen needed it. But for the championship, they needed Raikkonen to stay behind Vettel so that Raikkonen could fend off Hamilton because Vettel never would be able to with his damaged car. And it's never always easy. But anyway, so that's our section on Perez. I'm sure we've got plenty more thoughts about that one. But I mean, I'll tell you what though, Jez, I mean, it's a topic you brought up. What would you do going forward if you were Perez's team boss?
I would say, look, you're not fighting for a title. If you were fighting for a title against Ocon and you were both out in front and there was no other challengers, I could understand this. But we're not in a position to fight for a title. We're in a position of get as many points in the bag as possible. You yourself are damaging your reputation and you're damaging Force India's reputation. Force
Why-
India, to be fair, I think should have had a tighter rein on this from the beginning from Canada. They should have said, look, Perez, none of this give me a chance, because I'm sorry, but clearly from our data, Ocon is quicker at this point. We're swapping round. If we have a problem, we'll swap. If he can't get through, we'll swap back. If Perez is not willing to do that, then he's not a team player. And I would say, look, we've evaluated you. You're very quick. You look after your tyres. But unfortunately, your attitude is so bad that we're going to have to let you go at the end of the season.
Now, I agree with you, but James, I'm sure you could have said that in 4 words or 5 words, which is Perez, don't be a dick. Because that's basically what James wants to say. So anyway, we'll move on quickly then. Steve, you've got 3 topics to bring to the conversation. Why don't you give us one of yours?
Okay, first topic then. To do with the Belgian Grand Prix that was on this weekend. And this topic is about Alonso's so-called engine failure, where he basically said engine, and pulled into the pits. Now, I've read reports that afterwards Honda have come out and said they couldn't find anything wrong on the diagnosis of the engine to say that there was any failure. So, people's thoughts, did Alonso give up?
Let's put it this way. Okay, Alonso may have given up, but even if you've got a fully functioning Honda engine, Alonso could be driving it, a fully functioning, perfect Honda engine. If he says there's a problem with the engine, he's not lying, is he? The engine's crap. So even if it's working fine, there's a problem with the engine. Has he pulled into the pits and parked a working, functioning car? I think he has, and I wouldn't blame him for doing it either.
The point I want to put across to this is, look back a couple of races ago where they said, we're going to take maximum penalties at this event so that in Hungary, we're going to give Alonso the best chance he's got of scoring points. And they took a big whack. Now at Spa, everyone knew that the McLaren was not going to have the engine performance around Spa. Now, he did a great job in qualifying. He had a good opening couple of laps. But he ended up being in the sort of position we expected him to be in at the point when he retired. Now, you've got to say that he's probably done them a good, think of the right words. He's done the right thing. In a favour, he's saving. If that's an engine they're going to use for the next race, it's got less mileages on it if he's pulling it into the pits before the end of the race. But he's not going to be in the points. He's not scoring points. And they've taken the penalties. They've taken anything that, like Van Dorn did. He had 65 place grid penalty or something, which is ridiculous. But that's a completely another topic for another day. But yeah, his focus is going to be on the next race. But the next race is Monza.
Yeah.
So it's not going to help him with performance, is it, at Monza? So I don't see it being any better for Alonso in the next few races, personally.
Dave, what are your thoughts?
Well, okay, you look at the bare basics of it. Did Alonso park a fine car? Possibly. Was he wrong to do so? Some would say yes. I would say no. He's in a situation, he's actually in quite a powerful situation. McLaren want him to stay. McLaren know he's potentially still one of the best drivers on the grid. Problem they've got is, he don't want to stay if there's a Honda engine in the car. How does he get a Honda engine out of that car? He shows it up for what it is, a horrible engine. The problem the team have got is, do they stick with Honda and hope that it changes and it turns in their favour and the performance comes? It could be next year, but it's not. And if it's not next year, then if it's the year after, it's too late. So I think he has parked a perfectly working car, and I think he's simply done it as a 2 fingers up at Honda to say, you are not good enough. Now, I know that even Mercedes have even offered their services to Honda to help them with the problems that they are having. It may seem a bit odd that Mercedes have offered to do that, but they have offered, and they've done it not so that they can benefit or cheat or do anything sincere, because they've done it before in other race categories. This is something that Anthony Davidson and Paul di Resta have talked about. That Mercedes have done it before and helped other engine manufacturers when they're struggling, because the better their competition is, the better they look. So if they can help a team have an engine that actually works, then Mercedes still beat them, then it still looks good for Mercedes. The problem is, with Honda being Japanese, it doesn't matter how bad things get, they will not accept help from the outside. If it's not Japanese, they're not interested. It just will never happen.
James, go on. We've not heard you on this one yet. What's your thoughts?
I personally just think, to be fair, if Alonso's looking at the grid right now, what are his options? What's out there that could give him another title?
The only place I think is Williams. Whether it could be title, I don't know. But you put Alonso in that Williams, that's a whole different ball game compared to, no offence, Massa or Stroll. You put Alonso in that Williams, he might not win races, but he's going to get some podiums, I reckon.
He's going to get some podiums. You've got Paddy Lowe in there now, so that's a good sign.
Yep.
Been at McLaren designing World Championship winning cars. We've got Mercedes 3 times on the trot.
He was at Williams as well, in
Williams
championship winning days.
Yeah.
I had a chat with you, Dave, a while ago, saying, what's happened with Williams recently, and one of the things I pointed out was the fact that Williams always had at least one ex-world champion driving their car, or current world champion driving their car. And I asked you, when was the last world champion that drove for Williams? And I think we worked it out to be Villeneuve, or something, really stupidly long ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah. And when was the last time Williams won a constructors or a drivers' championship? It was when Villeneuve. It was when Villeneuve drove for him.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, well, is that the reason why they've not been doing well? I mean, the car's got to be up to it for a start, but you've got to have a driver that's got the ability to put it on the front row when it shouldn't have the ability to be on the front row.
Yeah.
And that's what Alonso can do for you.
Yeah, I mean, if Maldonado could put a Williams on the front row with a race, then Alonso sure should be able to. But, I mean, okay, if Alonso's in the Williams this season now, it's a totally different ball game as regards to how his season's going and how Williams' season's going.
Because I heard the rumour that Renault were thinking of supplying McLaren with engines for next year, which is all well and good, but you even look at Red Bull. Mm-hmm. Now, they're fast, but they're nowhere near good enough to be fighting against Mercedes and Ferrari around high-speed circuit. And I just think, even if you stick a Renault in that McLaren, you might get up near the Red Bull's pace, but it's still not going to be enough to challenge for the world title. Not
at all. And I mean, not only that, I mean, Red Bull have got their own issues as well. Some driver related, some not driver related. I mean, this actually goes on to one of my topics, which is Verstappen's retirement rate this season. 50% retirement rate from races this season, right? And quite a few of them have been from car failure. But, I mean, 2-point question on that. As you mentioned, the Renault's in the Red Bull, and that's not really doing a job. I mean, Red Bull wanted a different engine. But with that level of retirement rate for Verstappen, with the car having the problems it's had, is Red Bull a good place for him to stay in 2018? I mean, there isn't anywhere he can go, but...
Have Mercedes categorically said Bottas is fully signed up?
I would need to check, but I think they...
I think they have.
Yeah, I think they have re-signed him.
Yeah.
Because if I were Verstappen, I would be pleading for that seat. I would say Bottas is amazing on his day, but I'm amazing every day. So that's what I would be saying if I were Verstappen. There's only one time I've seen Verstappen be absolutely pants, and that were Monaco last year. and the year before that. But apart from that, he is, like Martin Brundle says about Hamilton, Verstappen is box office. And how many times do you see tons of fans in the stands? Yeah. He must bring in so much revenue, Verstappen.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all down to his driving ability.
Well, I know Sky touched on that when they were interviewing Christian Horner. I said,
how much money do you think Bottas brings to Formula One?
Yeah, probably not a lot.
Yeah. Just to clarify on Bottas, Steve? On his contract, 2 days ago, Toto Wolff apparently said,
if it starts with apparently, it's not true.
Yeah, the contract is there for Bottas, and he thinks it's a no-brainer for Bottas to sign it. Mm. So, in other words, Mercedes want to keep him on, and it's up to Bottas to sign the contract.
Well, the Mercedes is the car to be in, isn't it? I mean, it's easy for people as well to go, oh, well, things need to change. Mercedes can't be winning all the time. Hang on a minute. We for anyone that's watched over the last 8 years has seen the Red Bull era. And now the Mercedes, before that, the Ferrari era, the Williams era, the McLaren era. It's just the way it goes sometimes. I mean, I don't think they should ever end up all in with the same engine, but I do think regulations do need to change in some way to allow the smaller teams a bit more of an opportunity. But I mean, with Verstappen though, I mean, I think I could see him in Ferrari at some point. I can't see him in Ferrari while Vettel's there, though. I think Vettel wants a teammate. He gets on well with Raikkonen, but he knows that Raikkonen's not going to do anything to beat him. Vettel is going to want teammates like that. He doesn't want a teammate who's going to challenge him for race wins and challenge him for titles.
That's why he likes Ferrari, because he always remembers the Schumacher days where Schumacher was number one and he had a number two driver helping him along the way. Yeah. And that's what Vettel wants.
Yeah. And the thing is, for a team, it does become a problem when your number two driver is quicker than your number one driver. Because then they can argue, why am I a number two driver? I mean, look at Mark Webber. Webber is one of those drivers. He should have had a title.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at it in that season where there was the multi-21 situation. If Vettel had not overtook Webber in that race and Webber would have won it, going into I think it was Korea, the race at Korea, when Webber had a fault and dropped down the order a bit, or something favoured Vettel in that race over Webber. Webber could quite easily have took the title that season.
Yeah.
If Vettel had have stuck to the multi-21 ruling, not ruling,
the multi-21 was 2013, I seem to remember, because behind them was Hamilton and Rosberg, and Braun were doing the top job of shut up, Nico. We're staying in these positions because we're not going to change anything other than your driver points. And he knew at that point that 2013 Mercedes, it was good, but it wasn't a title winner.
Yeah,
it was good, but it just wasn't there. So what is the point in risking everything? Yep. Whereas the Red Bulls were doing the complete opposite. That was 2013. Now I think the thing at Korea with Webber, that was 2010. I remember that day where it was chucking it down in Korea, and he lost it in 2010. But absolutely that. But on the other hand, for the spectators, that's exactly what you want, isn't it?
Oh,
you want. And Ferrari miss a trick there every single time. They put their eggs in one basket.
Yep.
I
was going to say, there's been a few cases this season where Raikkonen could have won a race on merit, but instead the team did something with his strategy that ended up with him not winning the race. I mean, Monaco is one of those examples. I mean, you look at Mercedes, the lead driver gets the call on when to pit. That didn't happen at Ferrari.
Yeah.
And it's happened like that a few times. They've worked to strategy. It's almost a case of how can we get Vettel in front. And I don't think that's necessarily right. But I mean, I watched the Williams movie a couple of nights ago. And I've got to say, absolutely brilliant. And I'm not going to give any spoilers out, but they were talking to Mansell and Nelson Piquet, and their championship rivalry. Well, Piquet was contracted as a number one driver. Mansell contracted as a number two driver. Mansell was too quick. And he put himself in that position of, look, I might be contracted as your number 2 driver, but if I'm quicker than him, I'm going to beat him. And I'm going to try and do it fairly. And it created all sorts of problems. There's been an interesting comment on the YouTube chat from Dave the Harp, and he said the only way to even the field is all have the same budget. Now I've mentioned this because I do want to sort of comment on sort of budgets a little bit. I don't want to go into it too much. I mean, I think we'd all probably agree it's a bit ridiculous that Ferrari get so much money compared to the lowest team. Now, budget, I know, is something that the new media group, the new owners of F1, are trying to look at, but they're always going to have that problem of Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull now, who say, well, yeah, we do think the lower teams should earn more money, but we shouldn't earn less. And that's a major problem unless enough money can be brought into F1 that it is spread out more evenly, with the top teams not earning less than they are now, just with everybody else earning a bit more. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to know your guys' thoughts on that, but also touching on budgets a little bit. I had a thought, right? You look at GP2. GP2 is it's where you go to make that step to Formula 1, although it's been bypassed a lot recently. Problem is, if you win GP2, you're out of GP2. Because you're expected to go win GP2 into Formula 1, but it doesn't really happen that way. But because you're out of it, you basically got to go find somewhere else to race, which I think is wrong. So I think they should keep, if you win GP2, you should be able to stay and fight for your title. It'd make GP2 so much more competitive. But what about this as an idea? See what you guys think about this. Each team, right, gets their money off the media group, right? How much money they earn in the year. How cool would it be if part of the money they earn, a certain percentage of it, is donated to a GP2 team that takes on their name? So that then funds GP2 to have better performing cars. Now, it wouldn't necessarily cost the team anything as such, because it'd be such a small percentage covered by what they earn, but it'd be a good way of making GP2 much more competitive and having much more of a show of it, and having GP2 follow Formula 1 throughout the whole season.
Well, not only that, you'd be able to have the F1 test drivers and the young driver for the F1 teams. They're still racing in GP2, rather than, like you've said before, if they win the title in GP2, then they're out. Mm-hmm. They'd be able to stay in there and continue to race in there until there is another seat available in the F1. I like that idea, but it may need probably something. There's GP2 and there's F1. Maybe there needs to be something in between. So as like a secondary category to Formula 1, where it's the teams that run it. So it's not GP2. If you see my point.
So basically, sort of like the third car.
Yeah. Even if it's like the young driver program, but it follows Formula 1 round, so that. It's almost like not necessarily a Formula 1 car. It would have to be slightly reduced in power. It'd have to be slightly shorter race distance. But the DRS can be the same. But it can be done on a slightly cheaper budget. But it gives those drivers from each team the opportunity to be in a race car at the racetrack that weekend, and giving the supporters, the fans at this racetrack, something else to watch as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Di Resta. We'll let James speak in a minute. you look at Paul Di Resta, right? Some people think that when he got his opportunity to race in Hungary, think that he shouldn't have been allowed to, and it was a disgrace. Personally, I think hats off to him. He did a fantastic job with such short notice, jumping in, qualifying 7 laps, get ready for the race. I mean, he did a fantastic job, but just how much more prepared would he have been able to be if he was still racing? Like you say, if there had been an event earlier in the day that he's able to take part in as the reserve driver, he's in a car, he's driving, he's learning the track. So if anything does happen, he's there, he can do it.
The steering wheel can be swapped from one wheel or from one car to the next. So he hasn't got to try and memorise all these different engine modes and different things on the wheel. It can be all there It's just that it is more familiar to it because it's. But anyway, James, have the microphone.
Hang on, here's a thought for you. James, you can listen. Here's a thought for you. I wonder if F1 drivers get bored driving normal cars because there isn't enough buttons on the steering wheel.
I'll come to that in a minute, but I want to let James speak.
I personally think if Formula 1 is to carry on, it's going to carry on anyway, but we're just going to have the same problems we've had for the past 40 years. The key problem is you've got so many kids coming up that are absolutely shit hot and they can't get a drive because somebody with a chunk of change is sat there, like, for example, no offence, but Perez is sat there with his chunk of change. I don't think he's world champion material, but he's bloody good. Apart from driving people into the wall.
Apart from being a dick. Yeah.
Apart from being a dick, if I were a team boss who was lower down the grid, I'd probably want Perez in my car because he brings us a lot of money. But then, at the end of the day, people like Verstappen, they've got there by, his dad's wallet, but he's clearly got something that is just a little bit special, as we saw in Brazil at the end of 2016.
Well, I mean, there was the race last season as well. Or was it earlier this season? Earlier this season in the rain at China. I think it was China. My memory's a bit gone. Apologies, folks. I'm old. But it was raining, and Verstappen's overtaking people, and Vettel, 40 laps later, goes, "Oh, is that how you meant to do it?" And suddenly remembers how to overtake. And for me, if the most entertaining driver on the grid is your 18, 19-year-old prodigy, then there's something got to be asked about the drivers that are on the grid. I mean, I know one of your topics that you want to discuss is about the future of F1, James, but I thought we might spice things up a little bit and get into the dangerous territory now, as Steve's filling his face with chocolates.
It's not. It's a dog treat to try and keep the dog quiet.
You're eating dog treats. You only want to do that when you've had a drink. Okay, we're going to go into the realm for a moment of almost anything goes. So, who wants to put out their first topic for almost anything goes, guys?
To be fair, this part of the show I haven't even thought about, so I'll let Steve go, and while he's going, I'll think of something.
Ooh.
All right. Okay. This is
if this is the question, I think it is. I don't want to hear it, but if this is the question that I've got a feeling it is, I'm going to be so frustrated because it would be my question. But come on, let's have it.
All right. My question is, what unusual food should you keep in the fridge, like tinned tuna? Should you keep tinned tuna in the fridge?
That's an odd question. Not what I was expecting. No. Where is it if you go to a supermarket to buy it? Where is it? It's on a shelf.
So James, why does your missus keep tinned tuna in the fridge?
Does she? Oh yeah.
It's better colder, isn't it? You've got to say you wouldn't want some warm tuna. Well, I don't know. I personally think if you're going to have a bit of a cold salad, you don't want warm tuna on it or room temperature tuna. A cold bit of tuna, you can't beat that.
Okay, so
salad cream.
All right then, James. Before you met your missus, did you used to keep tuna in the fridge? And since you've been with your missus, have you changed what you do with tuna?
To be fair, I didn't used to put it in the fridge.
But now you do.
But now I do.
Do you know? Can I just say? Do you know why it's in a tin?
To keep it fresh.
So you don't have to refrigerate it.
What? No,
it's in a tin. No. So you don't have to refrigerate it. It keeps it fresh.
I thought tins were developed so that if there were a nuclear war, we could still eat.
Do you keep your baked beans in tins in the fridge?
Well, the baked beans come in tins, but the baked beans are going to be hot when I eat them, so there's no point.
I'm trying to think of other stuff that's in a tin now that's cold that you don't keep in the fridge. Can't think of anything.
What?
Corned beef?
Corned beef. No, you shouldn't keep that in the fridge because cold corn, like really cold corned beef, is awful. I like it when
Spam?
it's soft and mushy.
Hey, you know what? We're getting really off topic here.
It's what this part's about.
Actually, I'll save this one for my question because it just pops in my head now.
Go on, ask it. Go on. Do it now.
When I was a kid, I used to love potted beef. I had potted beef the other night. It tasted like dog food, and I spat it out. What is all that about?
I like potted beef. And tuna paste.
What make do you get?
I don't know. I just open the jar up and spread it on the sandwich.
Jar. So it's like a baby food jar, or because I seem to remember potted meat being in like a little plastic tub with a piece of, you know, like when you get milk and you've got a top that you peel back, like in a plastic tub with a top you could peel back.
That's pate, isn't it?
Maybe. Well, anyway. I think that's where I'm going wrong. I've gone and got stuff from a pot, and it wasn't nice. But yeah, it's weird, isn't it? How you've got a memory of what you like, and then when you actually have it, you realise your taste buds and your brain's changed a fair bit.
Like when you go back to an ex-girlfriend and then realise you made a mistake afterwards.
Yeah.
No
well, but like when you watch a film and you go, fucking. Pardon my French. Bloody hell, this is a good film. And then you go 10 years later, watch that film again, and you go, what on earth did I think were good about this movie? It's so crap, and it's making me laugh. It's that bad.
Yeah, I've had a few like that. But okay, so question of the day: should you keep tuna in the fridge? you know now, Steve. Though James is coming at you. He's going to come at you with one of his other topics. Okay, James, you mentioned about one of your topics being the future of F1. And to do with relating to car brands going to Formula E. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your thoughts on that and where you're coming from on that one?
Yeah, so we've got Mercedes currently came out 2 weeks ago saying we're moving away from DTM because the things that we develop for DTM don't really have a resemblance to what we actually produce for real. High-end cars, you can't buy them with the body kits, with the aerodynamics and all that lot, which kind of baffles me because you look at Formula 1 and you think, well, the Formula 1 car looks like a Formula 1 car. It's not what you're going to go buy for daily use out on the road. And it kind of doesn't worry me because I'm not worried about Formula 1. But when you see so many car brands jumping on the bandwagon of let's go to Formula E because that's the way that the future's going, we're going to have electric cars seen as governments are saying now by 20, whatever it is, in another
2040.
2040. No car manufacturers allowed to produce anything that runs on fossil fuels. Now, all the car manufacturers are like, right, well, I'll tell you what, let's jump towards Formula E because it is a cheap way of doing a bit of motorsport and learning at the same time. Now, for car brands, that is amazing. But for Formula 1, I think it is worrying. And Formula 1 needs to find what it is. Find its essence and what it's about.
Yeah, and stick with it. I mean, for me, the essence of Formula 1, right, it's about smelly, noisy, ridiculously powerful engines in cars that shouldn't be able to go around corners at the speeds they do or down straights at the speeds they do, but they can. And for me, I can kind of see why F1 went down that route of hybrid engines, but I don't think they should have done, or at least now that they have, I think F1 needs to turn around and go, right, we've tried the hybrid era, we showed that it can be done, but if people want electric motors, That's what Formula E is about. So if McLaren want to have an electric race car, Formula E, you can branch out. But Formula One is where you have your pinnacle, your fastest, your most powerful, your craziest, the sexiest, the loudest. I mean, I wonder how many people have been to F1 events over the last 3 years, maybe 4 years, and they've got there and gone, why is the GP2 car louder?
That's one of the main comments I see when I'm looking at Facebook, and of people that have gone and watched it live for the first time, and they've said, "I can't believe how loud GP2 is compared to Formula One."
Yeah. Plus, I think the main thing we need to do here is go right positives and negatives. What has the hybrid era done positive for Formula One?
I don't think it's done anything.
Apart from it being morally correct, it's not really done anything. Because at the end of the day, it's costing all of the teams way too much money. And at the end of the day, they're still using a petrol engine. So they're still using fuels and stuff. So morally, yes, they've ticked a box. But like I kind of agree with Dave that they should go, right, we've done that now. But if you want electric, you go to Formula E, and we're going to go down the route of, even though that the way forward is not going to be petrol engines, Formula One should go, okay, we're going to run with petrol engines, and we're going to have cars that will look nothing like any other car on the road, because it's a Formula One car. It's an open wheel, open cockpit car, and it's going to be designed to go around corners as quickly as possible. And a bit like what Dave the Harp said about the budgets, you want it to be done not to a budget, but you want it to be done so it's manageable for more teams. And with these current engines, it's not manageable. And I don't know how Honda haven't gone bust with the amount of money that they must have put into engines.
Yeah. For me, I personally look at it and go, right, I've got a bit of feedback.
Who's watching YouTube?
Sorry, my apologies.
No, you're right. So for me, I look at the hybrid era and I go, right, okay. For the first 3 years of the hybrid era, we had dominance by one team that got the engine right, and all the rest just had to hope and pray that both cars had a problem in order to win.
Why did Mercedes get it so right? Could it be because Mercedes were the team that wanted Formula One to go down the route of hybrid engines? That's why they came back into F1. So that's why they had to jump.
Yeah. Plus, before the hybrid era, you had a Renault engine, a Ferrari engine, a Cosworth engine, and a Mercedes-Benz engine. At that time, before the hybrid era, the Mercedes-Benz was slightly better than the rest, but not to a point where you were going to be able, just every single race it was going to be Mercedes win.
Yeah.
The engines got to a point where there was a very similar horsepower output. And for me, I look at teams like McLaren, and I just think, right now, they're struggling. When the new regulations come in for 2020, they need to hope and pray that it's equal playing field in terms of engines, no matter what. But it needs to be cheaper, and the hybrid engines are just way too expensive.
Yep.
There's not one thing about them hybrid engines that I've sat there and gone, oh wow. All I've done is, I've gone and bought myself a VW Polo Blue Motion. It's got a little bit of decent stuff in there in order to save fuel for myself. But I don't need to watch a motorsport in order to go and buy one of them. That's just common sense. Now, I understand these companies, they're trying to work out the best ways around things so that then when it comes to their road car, they're able to translate what they've learned into their road car development. But I'm pretty sure that it just seems to me a way too expensive way of going about learning how to create a hybrid engine. And by the time they've perfected it, they've realised hybrid isn't the way, because it needs to go fully electric.
Well, the thing is, the problem with fully electric is, as Formula E shows, they have to have two cars to complete a race because one car can't complete the distance. And I mean, the charge time of electric. I mean, there's more chance of electric cars being developed in a Formula One situation. I don't ever want to see F1 go electric.
No.
So the next best thing is Formula E is where electric cars will really learn what they need to learn, because it's a competitive environment and more teams, more manufacturers that get involved in that, the better. The likes of, is it Porsche, they've decided to get involved in Formula E. I mean Porsche getting involved, that's phenomenal. Although the idea of owning an electric Porsche to me just sounds a bit wrong. But I mean, you look at F1 again. I mean, you're on about the cost. The engines are a ridiculous cost. I mean, I don't know exactly how much they are, but I do remember that when the hybrid engines came out, obviously each team was budgeting or had a budget for their engines, and all of a sudden they're told, no, it's going to be 4 times the amount. And it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. And then people wonder why the smaller teams struggle. I mean, if you've got a naturally aspirated engine with no, or even a turbo engine, but with no hybrid components, it's like anything. The more electricity that's involved, the more opportunity of failure there is. That's just the way I see it.
I heard that something like for 4 engines for the season, it was budgeted for 100 million euros. Now, if that is the case, it is right. If that is the case, and an engine goes pop and they need to replace it, and they'll get a grid penalty for doing that, that's additional money they have to fund out as well for that additional engine. Yeah. So it's a stupid amount of cost for engines when you think how much a F1 V8 used to cost.
Yeah.
I mean, and all the teams knew what they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, engineers now, I mean, it's the same in the natural motor industry. To be a mechanic now, it's not about fixing mechanical objects. It's about knowledge on computers and data and all that kind of stuff. It is so much more in depth. And I mean, what's wrong with mechanical parts that go together and go really fast and make loads of noise? And there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, and happens to be a bit cheaper. But I mean, it's frustrating.
No, I personally look at it and I think, right, Formula 1's at that point where it's going to change. Since the credit crunch, how many manufacturers we lost? Toyota, BMW, Honda went out as a car.
They were the first one,
but they've come back, and
Renault went and come back.
Renault went and came back. I see Formula 1 going into an era where it is private teams such as Force India.
Same as Williams and McLaren, though. And okay, McLaren build road cars, but they are more. But they're more of a private team.
Yeah, private team. I see it being more. Get your branding on them cars. It's gonna be they're gonna end up with like a McDonald's team. It will end up with the biggest companies in the world going into Formula 1. I think that's the way that the new Liberty Media will go. And I see car manufacturers looking at Formula 1 going,
it's not for me.
At the moment, it's not for me because we want to develop our road cars. Because that, I mean, for me as a fan of motorsport, I look at a car and I just dream of how I'm going to drive it. Now, a lot of car manufacturers, especially high-end car manufacturers, are looking at cars where it pulls up at your door, you get in, and it drives you to work. That's my idea of a nightmare.
Yeah.
But to a multi-billionaire, that's the idea of a dream. But it's just whatever floats your boat. But these car manufacturers are going down the route of what is the future of road travel?
Yeah.
I personally think that sort of doesn't work with what Formula One is and is going to be.
Just going to touch on something a little similar while we're discussing this petrol cars and hybrid cars and all of that. And obviously there's the sales ban of new cars in 2040, in the year 2040. The sales ban of cars having petrol. In the year 2040, in the UK, you will not be able to purchase a new car that's petrol or diesel. All cars must be electric at the point of purchase, new cars. So you still have the old cars on the road, but the belief is they're going to put road tax up massively for those cars anyway. So in the year 2040, when you go to buy a new car, it's going to be electric. What's going to happen to the BTCC, the British Touring Car Championship? Because those cars are based on road cars that are, when you say purchasable,
motorsport's going to get really quiet. That's what's going to happen.
The BTCC is going to have to go fully electric.
It will.
Because the cars that are in there represent the cars that they sell.
You know what? I'll be devil's advocate for a moment, right? I can understand the use of fossil fuels and that using petrol is not particularly good for the environment. I'm sure there's people out there clever enough to work a way to make it a little bit more efficient without having to use hybrid technology or electric technology in a motorsport capacity. But just picture this. You make that phone call to work. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to make it in for the next 2 days. Oh, why not? I need to charge my car.
Well, that's why they're hoping by 2040 the development has improved such that...
Did they not see what happened in the 1950s and 60s when they were putting out videos? What will the world be like in the year 2000? It's nothing like what they imagine. We're not walking around wearing spacesuits on flying hovercrafts and stuff like that.
That's where I look at the government and I just think to myself, what a set of absolute ends.
The thing is, right, if it was... Sorry, James, go on.
The government turn around and go, right, no car manufacturer is allowed to produce a car that produces fossil fuels after 2040. What are the government doing in order to incentivise car companies and help car companies achieve that goal?
Yeah.
I don't think they'll do anything. And then when everybody is charging their cars in the year 2040 and we're sapping the power, we're using the power that we're paying from Russia, filling Putin's pockets, and we're all just looking like a set of idiots. I think the government then will go, oh, well, it wasn't our government that put it in place. It was Theresa May 20 years ago. Now, unfortunately, this is just my gripe with this country, is they'll put in these laws, but they won't be here to deal with it by the time that they're enforced.
Yeah.
So... it just seems to me like an utter joke by the government, and the fact that the government isn't actually participating with any car brand manufacturer. I mean, the biggest UK manufacturer of cars is Vauxhall. They could have said, right, we're going to team up with Vauxhall and we're going to try and work on specific power outputs of cars, and we're going to make a brand of car so that it's cheap and affordable by the year 2040 for you to be able to go purchase a car. It's cheap on road tax. You can drive it round and you can drive it all week and then charge it up or pull a battery out and plug another one in for 20 quid and it runs again for another week. If they'd have turned around and said, we're going to work on this and we're going to develop it for the good of our country, that'd have been great. But just by saying, oh, sort it out, car manufacturers, that's all well and good. But I think the government aren't looking at, well, what are the side effects of what could happen, such as sapping the energy power grid and we're all screwed.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to mention is, what car does Theresa May get chauffeured around in? I'm pretty sure. Jag. It's a 3-litre Jag.
Yeah.
Now, why is she not carted around in a milk float that uses electricity?
Because it's got no armour, it's got no bulletproof doors on it. But no, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's a little. It is a bit hypocritical to a degree, but at the same time, I mean, you couldn't expect the President of the United States to drive around America in an electric motor, because the risk of when it's being charged up and being stationary, there's too many risks, and it'd be the same for any major politician. But it is a little hypocritical to go, you should go electric, but I've got a 3-litre monster that drives me around. But I mean, it'd be even more hypocritical if when the time comes they're still driving around in petrol cars, while everybody else has got they're forcing electric on everybody else. Well, I think James is kind of right. I mean, to sort of just go, right, this is what you need to do, could be a bit wrong. What are they doing to facilitate it? And it's the same with Formula One. When the engines changed to the hybrid engines, what did F1 do for the teams to facilitate that change of engine and the extra cost?
Absolutely nothing. Well, they said good luck, and they have to deal with it.
Well, that's
goodbye, Haas.
You look
goodbye,
at Caterham was the example I was going to give. Caterham came into F1 on the understanding of, okay, this is how much it's going to cost for your base components. This is basically your outlay. There may be a little bit of variation. Within 1 year, the engines have changed. They get no say on it, and if they want to compete, they've got to pay X amount of 100 million more. And it's like, well, that's not really facilitating the sport. I mean, I do hope that Liberty Media are able to make F1 better. I think if they stick to the core things that are good, like for example, okay, some people might not like Sky, but Sky do brilliant coverage of Formula One. There's no doubt in that. Anyone tries bringing adverts into Formula One, you're going to start losing viewers. And I mean, we all watched. I think we all watched when Alonso went and did IndyCar. I thought that was brilliant. It was again a 2 fingers up to Honda to a degree of saying, look, I'm not going to do Monaco in your engine powered car. I'm going to go and race an IndyCar instead. Sod's law that his Honda engine there blew up on him. But having watched it, the only downside for me was the amount of adverts there were. It was literally like every 2-3 minutes, or so it felt. But at least what they did do was, when it was adverts, they had a little screen in the corner so you could still see the action on track. So I think Liberty Media could make F1 a lot better, but if they go too far to making it American, it's going to lose a lot of its European fan base.
Yep.
Go on, Sue.
I was just going to say, who's got the next topic?
Well, I'll mention mine because it kind of tags on to what we were saying there. My other topic was the number of engines and parts allowed this season and next season. Right? And it touches on engines again. And what you said a bit ago, Steve, about Van Dorn having a 65-place grid penalty. I mean, not being daft, once you've given someone a 20-place grid penalty, there's no point giving them anything else in grid slots because there's nowhere they can go. But for me, the teams having 4 engines this season, I think, is a bit of a shambles. Next season, it's 3. 3 engines have got to last the season. Now, they brought in reducing the amount of engines they could use for a number of reasons. 1 was to bring costs down. 2 was to increase reliability. And 3 was to stop teams chucking a new engine at the car for every session, which I can kind of understand. But at the same time, where's the reliability come from? It doesn't come from making a solid engine. It comes from being able to be quick enough that you can turn your engine down enough for 90% of the race, which to me is a bit wrong. I don't want to see cars blowing up each week, but that is a part of racing. But what I don't want to be seeing is teams going, yeah, we need to look after this engine or gearbox or hybrid unit because it's got to last the next 200 races.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and it's to the argument relating against the cost element. It's not saving the team's money if the engines still go pop and they need to replace them.
Mm-hmm.
So the financial side of it it doesn't really count. But like you say, I would much rather see them pushing the engines 100% of the time. And if the engine goes pop and they don't finish the race, there's the punishment.
Yeah.
You know, they shouldn't be driving around on reduced amount of power to try and make the engine last so many races.
I mean, if they said, right, okay, you've got one engine which is for the first Friday practice. It's got to last you the whole season for Friday practices. I mean, when you look at it that way, I'd look at that and go, that's a bit of a push. 20, 21 times of a 90-minute session. I don't know if the engine would make that. But that's effectively what they'll be doing with 3 engines for a whole season. Because the engine's got to do FP1, FP2, FP3, qualifying and the race. So the engine has got to do 5 sessions on a race day times, 7? That's a lot of mileage on the engine, which is a lot of being turned down. I'd much rather than bring a much more affordable engine and say, right, you can have 1 engine per weekend. If you get through weekend, like for example, if they said, okay, first race weekend of the season, you can bring 2 engines, right? You're only supposed to use 1, but if you damage it, you can put the other one in, so you can still compete. Right? But now you've got 2 engines that you've used that you can refurbish or use in other practice sessions. But effectively, you've got 1 engine for each race event. So the further you go into the season, each event you get a brand new engine, right? And you've got a stockpile of parts. That means you can go balls out every session. And as you get down to that later stage of the season, you've got plenty of bits to make sure your car's still going.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking of is, what about if they had a practice engine and a race engine? Now, the practice engines...
What about a Thomas the Tank engine?
The practice engines give out 80% of the power of the race engine, and it lasts longer. And you say, right, this is your practice engine, and it's meant to last you 4 races of practice for each event. And then you get a race engine, and that's allowed to last you 2 races, but it allows you to literally go balls to the wall, full power. Let's give it all it's got, and it'd give a little bit of excitement to the races, because the engineers and everybody had set up the car with that engine which only produces 80% power, and then they stick the engine in that gives 100% power, and the setup might not quite be right, which then gives a little bit of unpredictability. Maybe that's one way to go and keep costs down. So the fans get what they want. They get to see a race start to finish flat out, and also the teams keep the costs down, because the practice engine is just what they use for 4 events in all practice sessions.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's so many ways that it could be done. But I mean, the way I would look at it at the moment is, okay, watching F1, if a team's engine goes pop, does it make me think I won't buy their car? At the moment, if it's a Honda, yes. But if a Red Bull goes pop, it doesn't make me think, I won't buy a Renault. Or the same with Mercedes, or the same with a Ferrari. It doesn't make me think that. So if teams were going flat out, abusing their engine every event, and sometimes they went pop, it's not going to make people think, I'm not going to buy their car. Because all the team's got to do is say, look, we pushed that engine beyond its limits, and we're surprised it lasted as long as it did. That's one hell of an engine. All of a sudden, you got good promotion from it. Right? But obviously you've got the problem of there are car manufacturers that go, we don't want you showing our car on fire, our engine's on fire. People won't buy our cars. It's like, hang on a minute, look, if people aren't buying your cars, it ain't got nothing to do with how you're performing in F1, unless you're Honda. But I mean, that's the other thing though. I mean, for other car manufacturers, they could look at Honda at the moment and go, if we try and get into Formula 1, we're going to have the problems they're having.
Yeah, and the Honda being in Formula 1 is probably damaging Formula 1.
Yeah, but the thing is the majority of their problems down to the hybrid part of the engine?
Well, it clearly is, because you look at British touring cars and Honda are doing quite well in with a normally aspirated car production.
IndyCar?
IndyCar, yeah.
It was a Honda engine.
No hybrid stuff going on there.
Yeah. So, I mean, Honda can make damn good race engines. But for whatever reason, you bolt a hybrid unit onto it, it doesn't like it. But, I mean, that's another thing for me that... why F1 I think should get back to its core. Simplification. Of simplifying the complication of going fast. And if you've got a normal engine, so to speak, you don't I mean, how many times over the last few years have we heard people go, oh, my KERS isn't working, or my ERS isn't working, or I haven't got enough boost, blah, blah. And these are all excuses which, okay, pre-hybrid, it may have been, oh, I've blown my engine, or I'm losing oil pressure.
I've lost fourth gear.
I've lost fourth. Yeah, I mean, there'd always be problems, but it does seem to be a lot more now because of hybrid and because of the electric power. I mean, the thing is, if you lose your hybrid system, you're out of the race. You're losing 150, 160 horsepower.
You look at Max Verstappen, all right? Apparently, from what I've read, once they got that car back to the pits, they could start it up, and the engine was fine. It's got no problem with it. It just, for some reason, the electrical unit in it switched itself off.
Yeah.
And that is frustrating.
Yeah.
I think the only good part of the hybrid system is the fact that sometimes you can restart the car while you're on the track, as the Renault's shown a few times this season. Anyway, okay.
So,
I
was just going to mention something. Do you think...
No, never.
Ferrari are the biggest villains of F1?
Always have been, in my opinion.
We'll take this as one of my questions that I've just thought on top of what we were going to say.
Okay, one of your secret topics.
Because, I mean, you look at Formula 1 and you just think to yourself, Mercedes probably wouldn't be in Formula 1 if Ferrari wasn't in Formula 1. Because if they show that their car's better than a Ferrari, they're going to get tons of sales. Red Bull is just out there to sell drinks, which is a bit bonkers, but they've had run-ins with Renault. They don't even show the Renault sign on the side of the car anymore.
Yeah. Since when have Taco made engines?
You look at a Red Bull, and like you say, it breaks down. I do not go, I won't go buy a Renault. No. Because still in the back of my mind, I've still got, from over 10 years ago, Alonso winning 2 titles in a Renault. So I've still got that there. I've got all the Red Bull's wins with Renault engines. So in the back of my head, the reputation of Renault is not tarnished, really, even though they think it has been. Yeah. But car engine manufacturers wanting to sell cars, I do not think Formula 1 is the place to do it. Clearly, as they're all going to Formula 1. But
well, ask yourself this: did Enzo Ferrari go racing cars to sell cars, or did he go to show he'd got the fastest cars?
Yeah, probably just to show that he had the fastest car. But for Formula 1, I think if all engine, let's say, a hypothetical question here, let's say all car manufacturers removed themselves from Formula 1, and you had Cosworth engines priced at about 40 grand a pop. How many more privateer teams would you get coming in, going, oh, I want to beat Red Bull. I'm McDonald's. I want to beat Red Bull. I'm Ben and Jerry's. I want to beat. You know what I mean? How many teams? How exciting would it be? Because you've got Ferrari there.
Ben and Jerry's has overtaken the Red Bull.
Well, it's like the shredded wheat Ford in BTCC.
Exactly. My dad always goes, oh, I love that shredded wheat car. He's doing well. And I'm like, he doesn't even care that it's a Ford Focus. He's just like, shredded wheat.
I'll follow them.
So for me, I am starting to look at motorsport very differently than the way I used to look at it.
Okay.
And I think, unfortunately, Ferrari, being the way they are, with all these corrupt deals of, oh, I'm going to get so much money before I even start a season and all this lot, I think if you take all car manufacturers out, Formula One would thrive, I think.
Potentially. To answer your question, do I think Ferrari are the villains of Formula One? Possibly. But there's so many. But you know, it'd be easy to say yes, but then you ask so many F1 drivers when you were coming through the lower ranks, what car did you want to drive? Even if knowing the history, knowing how they work, so many of them say that red Ferrari. And they might be the villains, but you know what? Maybe us men are the same as women sometimes. We like a bit of a bad boy, and maybe that's why we like the Ferraris. Because, I mean, in Formula One, they've proved over the last number of years they've not got the best car, but fair play to them. They are putting up one hell of a show in this season. I mean, for me, I'd love Ferrari to win another championship. I just really don't want it to be Vettel. I really don't. And
Like me with Rosberg last year.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me and for many other Vettel non-fans out there, if Ferrari are going to win another title in the next 3 years, it probably is going to be Vettel. And I wouldn't be surprised if they can do it, if he can do it as well. But yeah, so there might be the villains. Steve, what about you? I know you, when you were younger, you used to be a bit of a Ferrari fan.
Well, for me, it was always, I liked the Ferrari F40, and that was about it with Ferraris. Nigel Mansell, when he was in the Ferrari, I supported Ferrari then, and that's the only time I ever have done. But for me, I've always seen Ferrari as not necessarily the enemy, but it's kind of like they're the other team, because I've always supported either a particular driver or a particular team. So like McLaren, I've always supported McLaren and Williams, mainly because they've had British drivers driving for them in the past. And it's just that Ferrari's been the team to beat. It's like you've got the team I like are the goodies and they're the baddies. That's just the way I've always seen it.
Yeah, which is fair enough. I mean, you talk about the goodies, the baddies, and being fans of drivers. I'm going to bring up one of my topics now. Hamilton. He's a bit Marmite, is Hamilton. People seem to either love him or hate him. There isn't really a, yeah, he's all right. But my question to you guys, though, is Hamilton is setting records, is equaling records, is on course for breaking records. Is he the best ever? If he beats the records, will people see him as the best ever F1 driver? I think the answer is yes.
Steve, you're gone.
Records speak for themselves. At the end of the day, if it says he's won the most, or if it says he's got the most pole positions or the most championships, whatever it is, by the time he retires, then you know his name's at the top of the list. That's all you can say. So I'd have to agree and say, yeah, he has to be looked upon as the greatest because he's won the most or done the best.
Well,
but there is, I know what you're going to say, there is that, what if he was racing against Senna?
I wasn't going to say that. No, I wasn't going to say that. What I was going to say was that, okay, he equalled Michael Schumacher's pole position, 68. Schumacher did it from 308 races. Lewis Hamilton's done it in 200, right? So all he needs is one more, and it doesn't matter if you love him or hate him, he is the best ever qualifying driver, as stats go, because he'll have the most amount of pole positions from less races than the guy in second place. So I mean, that's a phenomenal record. I mean, to put it into perspective, I mean, okay, Senna was on a better ratio, 162 races, 65 pole positions. So Senna, many will argue, well, if he'd have been able to carry on, he would have been better. Yes, he would have been. But then people could say that about Jim Clark and many other drivers from years ago. But I mean, when it comes to the race wins, I mean, the stats are quite interesting. I mean, Schumacher's pole percentage was about 40%, and Hamilton's is 26, I think it is. I've just scrolled off my bit of information there. But when it comes to the race wins, he's got a way to go. From Schumacher's 308 races, he had 91 wins, a percentage of 29.55%. Hamilton, from 200 races, has won 58 of them, which is 29%. So he's got, what, 33 to equal Schumacher's record. It'd take him another, what, 2 seasons to potentially do it, which would take him up to 240, 250 races. If he can do that, I think the stats again would say he is the best ever and could potentially keep going. I think the problem is there's just so many people out there that hate him that they could never bring themselves to actually say Lewis Hamilton is the best ever F1 driver.
For me, I look at Lewis Hamilton in terms of, maybe it's because he is a bit more of a celebrity than just a Formula 1 driver, but the way I look at him, he is very much like, and it isn't just because he's black, but he's very much like Michael Jackson for me. Loads of people either love him or hate him, and his personal life, even I can look at it and just think, oh, a bit of a loves himself kind of person. And you can look at Michael Jackson's personal life and you can think what you want of that. But in terms of doing the job on the track, or in terms of Michael Jackson creating music and dancing, there were nobody better in terms of entertainment value, other than Verstappen, who over the past
I've
3
never
years,
seen Verstappen dancing or singing, so it's hard to compare the two.
There's a little GIF that's come out with Max Verstappen and Danny Ricciardo just dancing at the top of Eau Rouge. You might want to check that out.
Yeah, that was from Channel 4.
But in terms of watching Lewis Hamilton as a driver on circuit, I've never watched him and thought, I've never watched him do what Perez did to Ocon. I've never seen.
Did you not watch the race in Canada with him and Button?
But, yeah, that was
one you missed.
Well, to be fair, Button sort of squeezed him into it well, didn't he? Really?
I can't remember.
There was a lot of spray. I've got to say, it were not a very nice race at the start of that. But in terms of Lewis Hamilton's driving, it is absolutely, when he's on his day, he is absolutely special to watch in terms of his driving. And I think that's what brings the majority of his fans in, is on a day where everybody else is struggling, he will ring something out. And that's where them drivers are held up on a pedestal. We've just said about Schumacher's records, and because he's got so many records to beat, such as 7 world titles, he's seen as, the Holy Grail. But you still see people that go, well, even though, Senna died, he only won 3 titles, but people still say, well, Senna were better.
Yeah. I mean,
so
I was just going to say that when the question has been asked to many former F1 drivers like Jackie Stewart, Mansell, all of them, and they're asked who's the best ever F1 driver, they all find it a very difficult question to answer, and what they've tended to do is go down the route of, when I was racing, this guy was the best, because it is very difficult to compare era to era. There's no doubt about that. From a basic statistics situation, then Hamilton's on course to be crowned as the best ever F1 driver. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Senna be able to carry on racing, as I'm sure people would have loved to see Jim Clark carry on racing. And it is a shame that their stories didn't go in the way to allow us to do that. But at the same time, I think it's very easy. I mean, maybe it's just the day that we live in, because of things like Facebook, Twitter, social media, all forms of it, and how connected the whole world is. It's so easy to be a keyboard warrior, and it's so easy to hate somebody from a distance. They're things that perhaps the likes of Senna, even Schumacher in his day, never had to deal with. Whereas you got the likes of Hamilton, where, I mean, I know people who won't talk to each other just because one of them supports Hamilton and the other one doesn't. But that's just the way it is sometimes. And I think those people that don't like Hamilton will just never be able to admit it. I mean, one thing I will say, though, is we'll get Steve's thoughts on this, is in Formula One in recent years, there has not been that many wow moments. In recent years, you think of Alonso and Webber side by side through Eau Rouge. Phenomenal. Yeah. Those kind of wow, holy shit.
Max Verstappen at Blanchimont around the outside.
Yeah, but there was one moment for me this season that just made me go wow, and that was Hamilton at Silverstone and his qualifying lap. Yes, the cars this year are faster, but that lap he did at Silverstone was just absolutely unreal. And us as gamers, racing Silverstone on different cars, and even in F1 cars, and having some knowledge of lap times and things like that, and just seeing the pace gap that he had in qualifying and watching the lap, it was beautiful. And I think F1 has missed so many of those wow moments, and there are so few drivers that are bringing them. But Lewis Hamilton is definitely one of them.
Yeah. I actually had a wow moment when I was watching Hamilton's qualifying lap at Spa this week.
Some tissues.
Well, no, for me, it wasn't Eau Rouge going through flat there, because that has now become kind of the norm. But I watched him and he was flat through Pouon. No downshift, no feather off. It just fully committed turning. And he was like 3 or 4 tenths up on, I think it was Vettel, just through that one sector. And it's literally the commitment and his the feel for what the car can do, to know that he can go through Pouon flat out. Yeah. And that's not an easy corner to decide to go to attempt that out.
Here's a question for you. Of Hamilton's teammates in F1, only one of them's beaten him. Do you think he learnt a lesson from him? Because Button's the only guy that beat him. And Button, I think Button's one of the most beautiful drivers that's ever lived. I don't mean looks. I mean, you watch Button drive and it's so smooth, it's so calm. And when he's been in fast cars, it's still smooth and calm, but it's quick. Do you think Hamilton perhaps took a lesson from Button that year?
I think over the time Button was with Hamilton, I think at first, Hamilton in the first year, which was 2010, was able to just beat Button on his pure pace. Then we had 2011. Hamilton, that was probably his weakest year in Formula One. And I remember watching him, and even just watching his demeanour out of the car and in the car, there was something quite clearly not right with his head at that moment.
I wonder if Nicole Scherzinger had anything to do with that.
maybe, but maybe it was just looking at, for the first time in his career, maybe it was just looking at Jenson Button and going, what am I doing wrong? What has he got that I haven't got? And he's doing stuff that I think I'm doing, but he's coming away with the results. I seem to remember the one big one for me, watching Hamilton, and you can probably find it on YouTube, and it was the moment in Monza 2011, Hamilton against Schumacher. Schumacher's Mercedes was not as good as the McLaren at that time, but it was a bullet in a straight line. So at Monza, the straight lines for me made up for the fact that the car wasn't as good in the corners. And it was a true test of absolute balls to the wall. Both both Hamilton and Schumacher just going at it, hammer and tongs. Hamilton kept probably doing the same mistake over and over and over, and Schumacher, rightly being slightly in front, was just able to get the car in the right position in order to defend the corners, because there's not that many corners at Monza. Hamilton then gets put on the grass at about 200 mile an hour, and even for me, that were a bit of a Perez Ocon moment. And at least it was just grass he was putting him onto. And I sort of sat there and thought, oh, blooming heck. Button came along, went past Hamilton because he was just recovering from being on the grass. Button came along and just breezed past Schumacher like he wasn't even like as if he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And it took Hamilton about 25 laps to get past Schumacher. Took Button 1 lap.
Yeah. I think
Hamilton had probably felt really, really annoyed with that.
Yeah.
And it quite clearly, by the end of 2012, had calmed down a fair chunk at Hamilton. And he was back to his all-time best. I seem to remember 2012, especially at Canada. Button ended up being lapped, and he was about 14th. Hamilton won that race in 2012. The one thing for me from Hamilton where I had that wow moment was, shame they don't go there anymore, it was the Nürburgring. It was 2012. It was Webber, Alonso and Hamilton fighting for the win. He was fending off Webber all the way through the race, pitted. Alonso stayed out. Alonso had a demon pit stop from Ferrari, came out in front of Hamilton and Webber. The running order was Alonso, Hamilton, Webber. Running through turn 2, Hamilton went round the outside of Alonso. And I was just... even going round the outside of that corner, you're more than likely going to get forced off, but he had that much speed that he were able to just go around the outside of Alonso, and that's not an easy feat to do.
Sounds like you've tried to recreate that on a few games and it's not worked, James.
That was for me just going, yeah, he is bloody good. But yeah, just even thinking about that, I forgot what the question was.
Well, I was about to say, someone had asked a question on YouTube saying, is there an electric car that charges as it drives? If not, why not? Because no one's been able to hook wires up to James's mouth yet to charge it up. Because I think that would work. But yeah, I mean, the hybrid cars, that's basically what hybrid cars are. So there isn't an electric car that charges itself as it drives, I don't think, but that is, I believe, what they are working on. But that comes from usually the braking system. But
Formula E do actually have that technology that they use that where when they're braking it puts energy back into the battery.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, I think it's time for another secret topic, and we've not had any of mine yet, so are you ready, guys?
Go on, then.
Okay,
here we go.
And remember, I did say that if you can ask a question, you've got to be willing to answer it, and you can't not answer this, guys. So,
yeah.
Are you ready?
No.
This portion has nothing to do with F1, by the way, folks. This is the part where we can ask each other anything. So, guys, when was the last time you shit yourself? And I don't mean, oh no, that was scary. I mean physically, oh no, I can't believe what I've just done.
I'd have to think back. It wasn't recent. In fact, sorry, I apologise. It wasn't that long ago.
I didn't think it would be, but the reason I've mentioned this question is because there's a lot of things that everybody has done, and shitting yourself is one of them. Everybody has done it at some point, so come on then, let's have a bit of fun. So, Steve, now that you've remembered, the only reason I've actually asked this question is because I know you would have asked it at some point, Steve.
Right, it would be about a month ago. Now, you've not asked for any... details. You just said when.
You got to give us some details. Come on.
Oh, I don't know. In bed watching YouTube and followed through on a fart, and I was like, "That's a bit warm." But yeah, there you go.
James is now thinking, "Why did I agree to do these shows?" So, James.
I'm really struggling here. I've got quite good
history of
control.
Bowel control, yeah.
Is it because you keep your tuna in the fridge?
Maybe that's the tip to take away, guys. I'm really struggling here. I can remember last time I was sick, but last time
I tell you, I would love
That
it
is
if James
going
right
way
now
back.
kept his microphone on, went up to his missus and said, "Vicky, when was the last time I shit myself?"
Yeah, go and ask her. Go see if you can find out.
I don't think I have. I really don't. Probably when I were a baby. I really don't. I cannot rack my brain when I last did it.
I reckon it must be recent and it's embarrassing.
No, because I'm not fussed about.
I'm waiting for this moment
stuff,
when he goes,
I'm not fussed about shitting myself.
I'll go and ask. Hang on. Give me 2 minutes.
While he's going to ask, Dave, do you remember when we were gaming about a month ago and the person we were gaming with was like, oh shit.
yes, yeah.
Won't mention any names.
No, I won't mention any names, but basically the person had literally just been and had a shower. They just got dressed and they came on the PlayStation and we're playing a few games with them, and then all of a sudden shit themselves. Totally out of the blue, farted, just unexpected. Oh, I need to go for a shower.
Yeah.
I can't believe that James has actually gone to ask his missus. You just imagine being his missus now, sat there just happily watching television. All of a sudden, the love of your life walks in and goes, "Excuse me, love, when did I last shit myself?" She's going to think James has gone absolutely mental.
Is he back?
Not yet.
There must be a lot of detail.
Yeah, if he's not back that quick. I can imagine the conversation though. Well, a couple of weeks ago, he's like, "No, I don't remember this." And he's going to be told the whole story. So I reckon we have some bets. How long ago do you reckon it was, Steve?
I reckon it was when he was probably in Australia with his missus over there because he'd probably had deli belly.
Yeah, that's possible. That is possible. Because he did say that was it the beer and the food over there in some places. He did say he went to one place where the coffee was nasty. So I wouldn't be surprised if...
That was another occasion when I nearly shit myself. The coffee when we was on that stag do, that coffee was lethal.
Yeah, if you ever go on a stag do in Cologne, be careful of coffee in hotels. It comes in small cups. Don't have more than the one. That's what we did. And when you share in a hotel room with 4 other people and there's only one toilet, it's not a good idea. Well, I hear James's voice getting a little bit louder.
Yeah, that's what I said.
So we've got confirmation from the partner.
Nah, we can't think. I've just said she's just said, "Oh well, what about when you've had diarrhea?" And I said, "Well, I've always made it to the toilet." One time, I can't think at last time I did that, but last time I did something where I was out of control. I had, but it's opposite end. But I'll tell you a story now. I was on holiday with my mum and dad. It must have been over 10 years ago. We're in one at Canary Islands. Can't remember which one. The place was full of Germans, and my dad were telling me off for goose stepping round the pool.
Yeah, as he should.
I got sunstroke because I spent too much time in the pool not doing my goose stepping. I then spent half the holiday chucking up. But I remember the day it hit me, this heat stroke, and my mum and dad were getting all upset and worried about me. I'm laid in the bath, and I said, "Put freezing cold water in here. I'm not feeling good." The freezing cold water kept me semi-decent. I wasn't too bad, but I was feeling really rough, really bad, really hot. And, all of a sudden, chucked up in the bath with me in the bath. So the clean water was no longer clean. I was just covering my whole body sick. So that was great. So I remember us releasing all the water and refilling it back up. I then sat there, and my mum was going, "We need to get send you to
New
hospital or something." And my mum, I said, "No, I'm fine here. As long as I stay in this cold water, I will be fine. I'm feeling not too bad." My mum said, "No, come lay on the bed." It wasn't my bed. It was both my parents' big double bed. Walked towards it, and I projectile vomited all over the bed. It just blew up. As soon as I walked towards the bed, I just blew up all over the bed. And yeah, the colour of what came out of me was bright yellow. It was like awful, absolutely awful. And I remember distinctly saying, and this is the only time I've ever said it, the pain was so much, I remember saying to my mum, "I want to die." And for a 15-year-old, I must have been in a lot of pain. That is the last time in my brain I can remember ever losing bodily function control. But touch wood, me bowels are not too bad.
If you shoot yourself tonight, I'm gonna love it tomorrow. But I think that the best point of all of that story is the fact that you went and asked your missus if you ever had, and she still loves you. So I think she's the winner out of all of this. Okay, moving on to the next.
No. You've answered.
Well, I can't remember exactly how long ago, but I remember exactly where it was. Because it happened in Steve's car.
I bet Steve loved that.
Well, he didn't really know at first, but then saying
depends what you were wearing.
Well, I was wearing jeans. The thing is, Steve was he was at my apartment that night, and we ordered a Chinese, and I usually have the same dish, but this day I thought, no, I'll have something a bit different. So I had the chicken satay skewers, because I like chicken satay. I think it's quite nice. Steve doesn't like it. So anyway, we eat the Chinese, think nothing of it, but then we popped out. I think we went somewhere to get Nip to get some milk or something like that. But anyway, we're driving back to my apartment. It's quite late at night, and I feel my guts going a little bit, and I'm like, I think I need to fart. So that's alright, Steve always farts and they stink, so it's time for me to get him back. I farted and I was like, that didn't sound like normal. That didn't feel like normal. Hang on a minute, that feels warm. Next thing I know, I'm like, I better lift my arse off the seat. So I've sat there literally pushing my legs down in the footwell, lifting my arse up off the seat. And Steve's looking at me, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I think I've just shit myself.
All I remember is opening the windows.
And I'm like, I sat there thinking, yeah, it's definitely warm. It's definitely feeling a bit wet. I was like, yeah, Steve, I think I've shit myself, mate. So I can't believe you've done that in my car. Thankfully, we weren't that far from my apartment. So anyway, I get in the apartment, I waddle up the stairs, I get into the bathroom, whip my jeans off, and I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely did. And I tell you what, it's the first time I've ever given jeans a shower. So
I remember driving back home after dropping you off and the windows wide open, trying to hold my breath. It was one of those moments where you just know it's going to smell if you breathe in. So you just try not to breathe in.
It proper did stink, and it looked exactly like the chicken satay. And since then, I've never had it. I've never had the chicken satay.
That's reminded me. And this is another time I was sick. Not when I cannot for the life of me think of a crap myself. But that's reminded me of a time where once again I was in the bath and I'd eaten a full bag of cheesy Doritos, and I'm not on about a small normal bag, multi-pack bag. I'm talking about one of them big bags, full to the brim. I'd eaten all of them, and I chucked up, and it tasted. Didn't taste like sick. It tasted like cheesy Doritos. Well, it did. It tasted a bit of both. I've never had cheesy Doritos since. It's put me off. But I used to love them.
Well, it's interesting because I was going to ask my question a slightly different way, which was, name something you really like but can't or won't have or do because of something embarrassing. And for me, that would have been, I won't have chicken satay anymore. I just will not eat it because of shitting myself in Steve's car. So for you, it's cheesy Doritos. So Steve, is there anything like that for you?
Don't think so.
No, you'll eat it.
I eat anything.
That is true. Okay, now to try and make this into a bit of some kind of F1 related twist to it. Many people will know that Mark Webber threw up while doing a race. And he actually had to stop racing, didn't he? He couldn't drive because his helmet was filling up while he was throwing up. But do you ever know of anybody soiling themselves in a race?
I don't know of anyone, but I know it's quite common practice for them to wee themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that I can think of I've ever heard of.
No. I think if I were a Formula 1 driver, especially sometimes I'll think I don't need a wee, and then 10 minutes later I do.
That's called
I think
age.
Yeah, that's it, 27. And I think for myself, if I were a Formula 1 driver, even if the sponsors wanted me to wear a white suit, I would say, I'm sorry, but can you make it black? Just in case.
Yeah, could you make it...
You don't want to be on that podium with a yellow stain down your leg, do you? Going, yes, I've won.
Well, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but Lewis Hamilton, I think it was last season, quite often you could see his red fire suit through his race suit around his arse, because his arse was always soaked. Now, that could just be sweat. I mean, us three are gamers and we've sweated like you wouldn't believe while doing races at times. So I could imagine that actually being in a hot country, in a really hot car, you would get sweaty. But, I mean, I'd find that quite embarrassing. And I know he comes across at times as being a bit of a... self-conscious of his appearance at times, but anyway. So at least I've got the worst of my secret comments out of the way, and nobody can now ask that me in the future because it's already out there. But I'm sure we're going to get worse ones later on. Okay, let's see. Quick look. Okay, James and Steve, you still got a topic of conversation each. Steve, I think we'll finish on yours, so we'll do James's next. So, James, your last topic, F1 related topic, if you would.
Yeah, what we all, Dave, what we all asked for. Last one.
My last one, well, it was the Verstappen retirement rate that we touched on earlier on, and the number of engine parts.
Fair enough. My third one would be, I get frustrated with Formula One's gaming efforts. Now, we've just had the release of F1 2017. I have not purchased it due to my feelings of previous incarnations of the game. If we were living in a dream world, what would be your dream F1 game? What features would you have, and what would you not have? And if there were a particular company out there that you think could do a better job than Codemasters, who do you think it'd be?
Dream. I don't know why. When you said in a dream world, for some reason I pictured Madonna. One of her songs, I think it was. So I'd go for Naked Good Girls. No. I'm similar to you. I've not bought the latest game for a few reasons. I have had a go of the new game, and for the short period of time that I was able to have a go of it, it didn't make me think I want that. And that for me was a bit of an issue. As for Dream F1 game, I think it's difficult because so many people are going to want so many different things. For me, I just want I want to feel excited while I'm driving the car. I want to feel a wow factor. I don't want it to be too easy. But at the same time, I want it to be enjoyable. I want it to look good. I want it to sound good. I want it to work. And they're factors I think that have been missing in recent racing games. I mean, I've moved from PlayStation more onto PC Simulator, and I do prefer that much more. There's so much more that can be done through PCs. So from F1 games, Codemasters for example, they need to completely redo their layout on the screen of what a driver sees, what a driver is able to access. For a start, for me, because I went from PC racing to going back and having a go on F1 2016, and there's so much information that I want, but it's not available to me. Simple things like, okay, I'm in first place, I'm in second place, but I know the guy that was in third pitted, but now I don't know where he is because he's not on the list.
Yeah.
In the top corner, I don't know where he is. So that for me is an issue, and that was something I was hoping that they would fix for this time around, but I don't think they have.
No.
So yeah, Dream F1 game, something that just gets my juices going. I don't know what that is. It's one of those things you don't know until you've got it and you're experiencing it. I mean, let's put it this way, James. I gave you a go on a game called Killing Floor 2 the other day. Did you get more excitement out of that 55 minutes of having a go at that game, more excitement out of that than you did the whole of the last F1 game you played?
Yeah, I was playing that game, even though we both said the graphics for that game are not the most spectacular that you could find on PlayStation 4. Yeah. But for pure enjoyment and feeling a little bit scared and getting your emotions going and
being immersed
this, that, and the
game.
other, yeah, you weren't thinking about anything else. I was not thinking about any other worry.
Yeah.
I bought. We were all part of a racing league. Don't need to mention what it is called, but we were all part of a racing league, and we did the commentary and live streaming using previous incarnations of the Formula 1 game. I think I probably, in terms of hours played on that game, would probably say about 2, 3, 4 days worth. So that's, how many hours is that? 80, about 90 hours worth of gameplay. I probably played that amount. And during that 90 hours worth of gameplay, probably all I got was frustration.
Yeah.
And through frustration, you become a little bit numb to a point where you just think, well, what is the point?
Yeah. Okay, we're kind of getting away from the what's your dream F1 game. I think it's fair to say what we've had in the past isn't it. So, Steve, you're actually the most recent F1 gamer, racer of us all, especially on PlayStation. So, your dream F1 game, what would that have to have?
For me, it would have to have in-game stewarding. I have never known a Formula 1 game in the past, apart from this current one and the previous incarnation, where you can have a collision and all it does is warn you that you've had a collision with someone. Which means if you're racing in a league, it's left to league owners or people that run the league to decide whether somebody did something they shouldn't have done and whether it was worthy of a penalty. Because the game doesn't penalise you if you deliberately crash into someone.
Yeah.
But not only that, right, that's one part of it. So if there's a collision, let's say you've got a turn 1 collision, someone's destroyed 3 people's races from turn 1, the game won't give them a penalty for it. We'll just let them carry on. So, but anyway, that's one thing. But the other thing as well is the corner cutting thing. They've introduced strict ruling into the F1 game last time round and then this one as well. But yet, I was driving around Australia earlier on today. Turn 12, I can cut it as much as I want. Won't even give me a warning. Yeah, I run fraction wide out of turn 12, and it'll disallow that lap and the next lap.
Yeah, that was something that pissed me off actually when I was having to go, because I was driving around Australia, and it wasn't just necessarily the cut, but it was the fact that it disallowed the lap I was on, right, which was an out lap, right, because I ran a little bit wide. But then it disallowed me next lap. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a moment. Yes, disallow the lap I'm on, no problem. But you shouldn't be disallowing me next lap unless I've done it on the last corner. Because that then meant that I had a choice. I either had to pit to change tyres, put more fuel in, or do such a slow next lap and hope I've got enough fuel for a third lap I wasn't planning on having to do. So I agree with you. I mean, I know some people will say, oh, the the cutting rules on F1 games are fine. No, they're not. No, they're
Well,
not.
I just want it right where the game is correct.
Yes.
And how can that be me asking for too much?
Yeah.
Because if I'm playing a game of football and I kick the ball and it misses the goal, it doesn't give me a goal.
Well, I was going to say
you know what I
something,
mean?
but I can't because we're on the FIFA 18 beta.
Yeah, but if I kick the ball and it goes over the white line and off the pitch and comes back in again, it doesn't sometimes allow that. It's off the pitch, it's a throw-in. So, it's not my ball anymore, it's their ball. But in Formula One, if I cut a corner, I've cut a corner.
Yeah.
If I've run wide, I've run wide. Now, okay, sometimes you can seem a little bit harsh, but it should be, there are the edges of your track, and if you go off the track, this is what's going to happen. But it just seems to be so inconsistent, because why is it okay to cut turn 12 massively, but you can't wander slightly wide somewhere where it's not going to benefit you anyway?
Okay, so in a nutshell then, our Dream F1 game doesn't exist. And probably never will. But I mean, actually touching on it though, I mean, from the things that you've said and things that you've said, James, and things that I've said, is our Dream F1 game is A, something that works properly, B, something that immerses you instantly. Maybe virtual reality, something that will help that along in the future. The problem is that really good VR headsets are too expensive, and it's going to take a while for those to come down in price. So we want something that works, that is immersive, something that excites us, something that makes you want to get on the game and spend a few hours playing it. I think... I mean, I've said before, though, I mean, it's a difficult one to describe, but also people want realism from the F1 games, but sometimes when they're given realism, they don't like it. And one thing I've always mentioned is the sounds. And this is something I mentioned to you the other day, Steve, when I was having a go of F1, the new game, driving the McLaren. The noise it makes is a little interesting, and at first it didn't bother me, but after driving it for 45 minutes it was starting to give me a bit of a headache. I didn't like the sound. Now, it wasn't as bad as the previous games' Ferrari engines that used to whistle, or the Marussia from 2 games ago that used to whistle, sort of almost making you think you got tinnitus. But if those sounds are realistic, people don't like it, so then they have to go away from realism. But it's a very difficult scenario. But I do think there's so much. There is so much more that I think they could do with the games, and yeah. So my dream F1 game would be something that just makes me think about playing that and nothing else. Yeah,
my dream F1 game. You look at the Formula 1 game that's just been released. Now, for me, if I would probably want more of a collaboration with the actual teams in Formula 1. I would negotiate something with Liberty Media so that there's more interaction with what it's like in each team and stuff like that. But also, just the fundamentals of the feeling of the car. I played... I do like the Project Cars games. I played in an old Formula 1 Lotus. Now, that car produced an insane amount of power, feeling, sound, and I could not wait to come home to practice, even with no other cars on a circuit, just to come home to practice to get that car quicker.
Yeah.
I've not had that feeling in a Formula 1 game since probably 2010, and that was on a PlayStation 3 7 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
it all comes down to it's not something you can conjure up straight away, but it's just down to feeling what you feel like when you're playing the game.
I think as well, there's tiny little details that can make such a big thing. I mean, okay, as I mentioned, I'm racing on sim racing, and I mean it's not easy. There's no doubt about that. But I do have the bonus of I'm part of a team with quite a number of drivers. So if I have problems with the setup, there's plenty of people I can talk to and stuff like that. But something that, like for example, I could say to them, can you try my, like you're this quick, that's what your pace is on your setup, try mine, see if you go quicker, see if you go slower, see what you think about it. And okay, on PlayStation people can do that as well, like in the racing leagues with their teammates, they can do all that kind of stuff. But there's one tiny little feature that I've wanted to have from F1 games for a number of years now, because it's such a tiny little thing, but it could make career mode so much better, right? So much more immersive, and it's not even to do with being on the racetrack and driving. Okay, I would love it if while sat in the pits I could go onto the TV screen and go, what setup is my teammate on, and have a look at what setup he is using, right? Because then I can go, well, he's done that lap time on this setup, right, I'll try that. And then I can try editing my own setup, see if I'm fast or slow, blah, blah, blah. And even to have that option of going, teammate, will you try my setup? So you can then give your setup to your teammate, who's an AI driver. He goes out, does a number of laps, and then you get a perspective of somebody else on your setup and whether they go quicker on that setup. And then the game, or you, has the choice of saying, right, well, you're quicker on my setup, you should use that computer, and I'm quicker on your setup, so I'm going to use yours. But that all of a sudden becomes that little bit more immersive, and it's a very simple thing, really.
Yeah.
And that's something I would love it. But not only that, if you're a young person that's just getting into F1, you've got no idea about the setups or what to do, having that kind of feature would help you so much in being able to learn how to tweak the setups.
Because I do believe, just from watching live streams, and it's very, very primitive, even they've said on the live streams with Project Cars 2, there is an engineer feature where the engineer will either come up with text or he'll talk to you and basically say, are you experienced in understeer? Here are a few basic tips in order to solve understeer. Just the basics in order to give a relatively new person to motorsport an idea of how to set up a car. But unfortunately, the problem with F1 games recently has been not even relating anything to a car. Just it just comes down to, well, put your wings down to 1-1, get your suspension up to maximum, and really, if you go for these silly setups, your car will be like a bullet. And for me, I just look at that and I just think there's something about the entire setup that is completely wrong with F1 games.
Yeah. I'm sure Steve's got a few thoughts on this as well, but something I just want to quickly mention as well is I do think that the setup, the way you do setups on F1 games is way too basic. On the flip side, I think the way you do setups on Project Cars, or even on R Factor, is way too detailed.
Complicated.
It is.
You could have a middle ground, easily have a middle ground, which would be quite nice.
Yeah.
See, I think that what Dave touched on really is, in your career mode on F1, you should be going to a circuit, let's say Silverstone, and it should straight away say, this is the setup that your teammate is currently using. Do you want to go with this setup first? Yes or no? That way, you've got a base setup which is going to be reasonable for that circuit. Because at the moment, you've got a choice of 5, which is high downforce going lower to obviously a top speed with low downforce.
Yeah.
But for Silverstone, what do you want? High downforce or low downforce? Because people interpret it differently. And if you're a novice to the sport, you're not going to know what is a good package to go with. But if it did say to you, this is what your teammate's going with, because it's an AI teammate, then at least you've got a bit of an idea. and then you can tweak it from there. I think that would be a good way to go with gaming.
Yeah, definitely would. I mean, it's. I mean, okay. David Hart just mentioned on YouTube. He says you can use a rival setup in time trial. Yes, you can. You've been able to do that for a number of games now. The problem is time trial setups tend to be quite useless when it comes to competitive racing, and also there are such fine margins between what works for one person and what works for another. I mean, okay. I actually don't think it's good that you can take a rival setup on time trial on F1, but at the same time, it can be quite handy because it means that people can go to the fastest guy if they can get anywhere new and take setups. And there's plenty of setups out there on YouTube. When it comes to competitive racing, though, it is quite setups do have to be quite different because, like, people will either go maximum tyre pressures because there's no tyre wear and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many small details. I mean, when I was playing the new game, there was something that bugged me, and I've seen people on the forums saying, "Oh, the graphics look amazing," and blah blah blah. Well, when I was playing the game, I sat there and I was like, "Hang on a minute, are my settings right or not? Because this don't look very good." And even down to looking at the helmets of the official drivers, I'm like, okay, either I've got to a point now where my eyes are so old that everything's blurry, or their helmets are just a complete blur. And that is how they are. I do think graphically the game doesn't look very good at all. And for me, it's frustrating in a way because where I race on R Factor 2, the graphics are phenomenal. The only problem is I'm never really able to show that because being able to record it in the level of quality that I play it on and then upload it to YouTube, it gets compressed and processed so much that the quality is reduced to a point where it makes people go, well, that doesn't look very good, whereas in actual fact the quality is phenomenal.
I've heard stories of people driving up straights and trees loading further on down the road.
Now there is something on the F1 game you can change, and I'm trying to remember the setting. It's called near something. It's in the graphics section, and basically it's at what point does the screen refresh ahead of you? So, like you say, with the trees refreshing when they're quite close to you, or appearing on the screen when they're quite close to you. If you put this, I think it's near clip rate, I think it's called, and you put it all the way to the right, and basically, if you're driving around somewhere like Canada, you can see Montreal in the distance with all the buildings. But if you put it all the way down the other way, literally, you've just got your circuit and the walls around it, and occasionally the stands will build up as you're driving towards them. So the near clip rate, I think it's called, does actually put all of the detail on in the distance.
I could understand that on PC because the amount of power you need sometimes for that kind of situation, you need a good PC to be able to cope with the level of graphics that are capable. Just to quickly mention as well, David Harp would appear he shit himself when he was 14 while he was minding his brother's market stall and he couldn't keep it in. I feel for you, Dave. I spent most of my younger years shitting myself at different train exhibitions. I was always ill for them for one reason or another.
That must have been about 50 years ago for Dave the Artman.
I thought he was going to say for me, bloody hell. For Dave, it could have been. Okay, let's see. Next topic. I mean, I think it's fair to say that a Dream F1 game doesn't exist, and there's a lot of things that we would all want, but I think the basics does come down to we want something that works. And I mean, I remember when we got I think Gran Turismo 6. You turn that on, you didn't play nothing else until the next game came out, which wiped the floor with it. I've not had an F1 game that's wiped the floor with other racing games for years. And I've been waiting for it, and I feel I've been let down so many times on that one. So unfortunately, it doesn't exist. Maybe it will in the future. You did say though, James, should somebody else make them?
Yeah.
I think I actually think the last game got to a point where if there was another company that could have done it, that was the time to go and do it.
Yeah.
I think,
I mean,
knowing what we know about how Codemasters have made games in the past few years, they have just shown that they don't have the knowledge of F1 or not been able to gain the correct information to be able to create the correct game. The mistakes that they've made along the way with tyre ruling on the previous game, the game before that to do with the white lines and not knowing that the white lines marks the edge of the circuit. And just if you're making a Formula One game, have somebody to advise you on what is correct.
Yeah, that's what I mean by getting the teams more involved.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
But that would be good if the teams were more involved. I mean, I know people as well I know they did it for last year and they've already done it for this year's game. Moaned that the cars in the game didn't look like the cars on the track. Like the front wings were different, or the rear wings, or like different sponsors. Things had evolved, and I know that Codemasters did say that they would update the game as they went on, but it turned out they had to fix the game as it went on. But one of the major problems that Codemasters does have in respect to how the cars look is they can only show what the F1 teams allow them to show. So if Mercedes go and get a brand spanking new front wing with loads of extra elements that looks absolutely amazing, it doesn't mean that they're going to give Codemasters permission to put it onto their game. And even though Codemasters will ask, the amount of times they get told no is unreal, and that's what I do think people sometimes struggle at. I do know that Anthony Davidson used to work with the F1 games, and I think that was of the time where the F1 games actually were really good. They were pretty good.
2012,
2013. I think
He is involved with this game to a certain extent.
He's on the commentary, I know that. But his helmet's not on the game, so I don't think he's been driving it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but he is in the game.
For me, it's a simple thing. I've played the past 2 weeks. I've played on Project Cars for about 8 hours. That game came out before F1 2015. So that's over 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's. I know. I love that game, but that just shows you what kind of. I know as well. It's got plenty of other cars and tons of other circuits, but I just can't see how Liberty Media can look at Codemasters and go, "Yeah, you're doing a really good job." I can't see it.
Well, you never know. Okay, we'll move on to our final F1 related topic, which, Steve, I believe is yours. And this, I think, is probably the most interesting topic we could discuss all night.
Possibly. Robert Kubica. Should he be in Jolyon Palmer's seat? What do you reckon, James?
Well, before the summer break, you couldn't look at an F1 website without Kubica's face on the front cover, grinning. But since that summer break, we haven't heard a peep, have we? It's all gone very hush-hush.
Oh, well, actually, it seems you may have been living in a hole for the last couple of weeks, James. Because I do know Steve's got some information. I'll answer your question, though, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't believe I'm going to say this, but no, he shouldn't be in Palmer's seat, but he should be in an F1 car. I don't think Palmer deserves to lose his seat. He's been given a dog of a car this season with so many problems, and not his fault. And I don't think you could boot him out for that. It'd be like getting rid of Max Verstappen because his car's been breaking down on him. You just wouldn't do it, so why should you do it to Palmer? But should Kubica be in an F1 car? Yes.
So if the answer is yes, whose F1 seat would you put him in? Someone like Stroll?
Stroll, Grosjean, Perez, Ocon, Verline, Magnussen. How many others is there?
Van Dorn.
Ericsson.
Oh God, yeah.
Van Dorn, yeah.
Ericsson, he must be the worst driver on the grid.
Oh, I don't know. Magnussen's up there as well. I think.
Ericsson, Magnussen, them two are clearly for me two drivers that I look at and I go, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Magnussen, how he's managed to get where he is. You look at McLaren and they get rid of people that either have an attitude problem or they're not good enough.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they get rid of Magnussen. Magnussen has a year out and then comes back with, where did he go?
Haas.
No, he was somewhere. He was Renault, wasn't he, last year?
Yes,
something
he was, yeah.
Something happened there because he were beating Palmer for the majority of the season, and then in the last 5 or 6 races, Palmer came out of his shell and whooped Magnussen's ass. They even produced a car, which was the Kevin Magnussen edition of a Renault Clio, and he had his own branding clothing line with Renault. Something obviously went sour, and just from watching Hulkenberg's and Magnussen's exchange in Hungary, I think something a bit like Perez's reputation got a bit tarnished this weekend. I think Magnussen's reputation got tarnished to a point where I didn't used to mind Magnussen before. I now will look at him and just think, get lost. Because I just think there's no place in Formula 1 for that kind of attitude.
Yeah. I wonder what would have happened if he'd have said to Ron Dennis, suck my balls.
Oh.
Maybe that's why he wasn't a McLaren anymore. Hypothetically, of course.
Maybe that's why McLaren sacked him on his birthday.
Ooh, maybe.
Do you remember? They sacked him on his birthday. Maybe it's because he may have said something to somebody high up and they said, right, let's just see how this goes, and if he continues to be like this, we're going to do him in the worst possible way.
So would you expect to see Kubica in Formula 1 next season?
No. I'll give you my reason why. Right? I don't think he could get out of the car with a halo on it.
Nope. I don't either. I think, unfortunately for Kubica, as fast as he may be, unfortunately, with the current way Formula 1's going of, we need a halo because we need to protect drivers, and I understand that it's not worth playing in a sport where you're risking your life. I don't watch it and ever feel like, I want to see a bloodbath. But at the same time, them moves that are risky, you appreciate them 20 times more.
Oh yeah, they get your heart pumping, don't they?
Exactly. And I think maybe that heart pumping or blood rushing to your head watching it may be diluted a bit next year when the halo's introduced. But in terms of Robert Kubica getting back in Formula 1, I think it's been too long. We've seen Schumacher have... How many years was he out? He was out in 2006, came back in 2010, so that was 4 years. And he struggled in 2010.
He did that. He did actually want to come back a couple of years earlier, but his neck couldn't cope.
Yeah, when Massa was out, he wanted to come back, and unfortunately, Ferrari chose Luca Badoer, which was a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I think they would have chosen Schumacher, but he had his motorbike accident. I think it was a motorbike accident and hurt his neck, and unfortunately it wasn't strong enough for him to cope. I think had he been able to cope with the G-forces, I think Ferrari would have put him in that car.
Yeah, I just think if you've got a great like Schumacher struggling 4 years out, and how long it took for him to get back up to peak condition, which was around 2010, he was probably more near Nico than in 2010 and 2011. If it took him that long to get back to being semi-decent. The Mercedes in 2012 wasn't spectacular at the end of the season. It was fairly decent at the beginning. If it took him that long to get back, if Robert Kubica is at the same level even with three fingers, if that car rolls upside down, he cannot get out of that car. And as well, just for me, just watching it, it's a bit of a... I just look at it and I just think... You look at Formula One and you look at these big businesses and they'll look at people and they'll go, it'd be a remarkable story. Renault could have gained a load of publicity, got rid of Palmer and gone, whoa, wow, we've brought Kubica back from retirement. Aren't we amazing at Renault? Could have been all well and good. But you've then damaged Palmer, you've damaged Kubica, because if by the end of that 6-month period, if he's not on the same level as Hülkenberg, why have you bothered?
It's an interesting one. I know you've got stuff you want to say, Stephen. I will let you. For whatever reason, Renault have decided for the rest of this season, or at least for now, he's not going to take Palmer's seat, and I think that's the right call. Whether it be from data or his arm or whatever it is, I mean, I would love to see him in a car, and I do think that. I don't think he would fail, but I don't think Palmer should be forced out to allow him to come in. But again, we were talking, 2 hours ago now, about if there was a reserve system where the reserve drivers could race, then we could be watching Robert Kubica test himself against the rest of the reserve drivers. I mean, think of it. You could have Robert Kubica fighting Paul di Resta, racing against all of these young up-and-comers who are still in nappies, wanting to get into F1. But, I mean, imagine if that was the case, you'd have all these youngsters going, I should be in F1. And people saying, well, hang on, if you can't beat Robert Kubica, who's only got 1.5 arms, you ain't ready for F1, kid.
Yeah.
So, Steve, come on. Tell us what you was going to say, Steve.
Well, before I decided to bring this topic up, I thought I'd research it. And what I found out is that Renault have said Palmer's in his seat for the rest of the season because he's contracted to that. And from further reading, it sounds more like Palmer's got something in his contract to say that Renault can't remove him from his seat. So it seems like even if they wanted to put Kubica in Palmer's car, it would be against the contract that Palmer's got. But also something else that was mentioned to me was, well, surely Kubica's not got a super license, and to compete in Formula One, he'd have to meet the criteria for it. And the criteria to get a super license has changed last year, and you now need to compete for so many races in a lower qualifying formula. But on researching all of that, I did find something from the FIA saying that Robert Kubica does meet the exceptional circumstances criteria for a super license. So, he could have a super license without going through the lower formulas again.
Well, the things you mentioned about the lower formulas, but the lower formulas being GP2, basically it's the FIA saying if you want to be in F1, you'd have to compete in GP2 to get your super license, because they brought the rules in to stop people who are too young from getting in. The problem is Robert Kubica, I don't think, can compete in GP2.
There are other formulas that they can compete in, such as DTM. That's a way into Formula One. That's classed as a lower formula. Believe it or not, IndyCar. If you race in IndyCar, that gives you a way in to a super license for Formula One. So there are certain ways, but I think because of his situation and obviously raced so many races previously in Formula One, he meets what they call the exceptional circumstances. He qualifies for the exceptional circumstances. So he doesn't, the possibility of having a super license is not going to hold him back to having a race seat. It's just what car will he be in. So I think as long as he can get out with a Halo being in there, I can see him being in a car next season, but which one, I don't know.
Well, was it before you researched that you mentioned to me that you'd heard that he wasn't going to be able to race in 2018, or was that to do with because of the super license?
Well, yeah, the first thing I heard was I was talking to one of our friends about it, and they said, well, he won't be able to race because he needs to have a super license, and to be able to have a super license, he needs to be able to compete in one of the other formulas to qualify for a season first. But then on researching it, apparently the FIA have put a statement out saying that he does meet exceptional circumstances.
Well, okay, in that respect, I think someone like KUBICA, could you just hand him a super license? I think the argument would be there to say yes, you could. He's done F1 before, we know he's capable. But then there would be case for the argument of, well, hang on a minute, he had a massive crash. Do we know what he's capable of doing with his arm? And that's where it may be down to the FIA to say, look, okay, we're going to grant you a super license, but you need to complete so many practice sessions so that we can get your data or whatever it may be. And for all we know, they may have done that with Renault.
They have. That is something I didn't elaborate on, but from him doing his Hungary test, that satisfied the FIA. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you two saw Hamilton trying to get out of the Mercedes at the weekend with a halo on it.
No, I didn't see that.
I didn't see that, no.
Okay, neither of you saw that. Okay, you'll find this interesting then. Right, I thought it was interesting that on the cameras they showed Hamilton getting out of the Mercedes while it's got its halo on, because usually the driver would still be sat in the car and they'd just unbolt it. But it wasn't until the commentator mentioned that's I think it's Jack Bauer, the FIA delegate, who is there to record how long it takes Hamilton to get out of the car. So you know the test that all the F1 drivers have to do, not the extraction test, I think it might be called that actually, but basically they've got to get out of the car. I think at the moment it's something like 7 seconds. Get out, so it might be 5 seconds, but then they get another 3 seconds to put the steering wheel on. And Paul di Resta had to do it before he raced at Hungary. All drivers have to do it, be able to do it before the start of the season, and they're tested at different times over the course of the season, I believe. Well, with Hamilton, they would time in how long it took him because they need to get an idea of how long it would take drivers to get out of the car, because they need to change the time limits they're going to allow. Couple of problems to this situation with Hamilton was it took him an age to get out of the car, and then he forgot to put the steering wheel on. So the FIA guy sort of stood there looking at him, sort of pointing at the car, going, "You've missed something." And Hamilton stood there with his arms out, going, "I'm out." And then he realised, "Oh, I've not put the steering wheel on." It must have taken about 35 seconds, but it was quite amusing. But it was difficult for Hamilton to get out of the car while the halo was still on. Now, the commentators did say, well, he'll be able to put more force on the halo to pull himself up when it's properly integrated into the cars. At the moment, they're just bolted on, so they can't put much force on it. He'll be able to put more force when he's pulling himself up. But it got me thinking, with the way the halo is, I don't think Kubica's going to be able to get out of it. I could be wrong, right? He may be able to do it, no problem. But let's say, for example, if he crashes the car and he hurts his left arm, he's not getting out of the car. Now, the possibility of that happening might be very low, but it's a possibility. Now, something I want to quickly touch on as well with the halo, I know that I've thought it, and a number of other people have with the halo, of if the car rolls over, how are they meant to get out? Because they can't get out. Well, apparently the halo is designed in such a way that if it rolls over, it won't balance. It'll tip to one side or the other given the shape of the halo, which will give the driver more room to be able to get out.
That's all well and good, but if you remember Alonso last year,
Australia,
where
I think
the car
he
ended
himself.
up in probably the car ended up in a situation where it was if that had a halo on it, there was no way he would have got out of that.
Yeah,
because it was at an angle that was up against the wall.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at Pascal Wehrlein in Monaco. If he had a halo on, there's no way to get out of that either. I'm pretty sure they had to push the car back over with him sat in it still, which probably won't have done his spine and his neck any good.
It didn't.
But for me, it's a bit like what we were saying about earlier with the government saying to car manufacturers, you're not allowed to produce cars with fossil fuels after 2040, but yet they're doing nothing in order to sort of set a rule before they've actually put any effort in. Whereas you're seeing exactly the same thing in Formula 1 here. They've said, right, we're having Halo for next year, which is fair enough, but yet they haven't done the full tests. Yeah, they might have thrown a few tyres at it to see if it deflects tyres and stuff, which is great, because we don't want to see somebody break the neck. But at the same time, if I'm ever going to watch Formula 1 and a driver is going to end up in the same situation Alonso was in, and for some freak reason, the fuel tank sets alight, I'm going to just... Yeah, there's sort of, it's pros and cons, but...
Motorsport is dangerous kind of thing, but I know what you mean.
Exactly. Like Martin Brundle said the other week, with MotoGP, what are you going to start doing? Putting a roll cage around a MotoGP bag? You're not, are you? It's fundamentally dangerous, and the drivers know that getting into the car. I know I hated the feeling when Jules Bianchi went under that truck.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling, even when Hamilton won that race, I felt like Formula 1 should have just said, look, we're not having any celebrations because something really bad happened.
Yeah.
And I think that probably the drivers were told, look, don't be going mental with champagne because it's not a good day, to be fair.
I don't think they would have needed to be told, to be honest. I think if any of them drove past that scene, they would have known.
Yeah,
But, I mean...
But I didn't like watching that.
No.
I think development of something to protect the driver's head is there, but what solution they've come up with is a quick fix that fixes one job, but I can still see some negatives.
I always see it as, okay, I can understand people feel the need for it. I can fully understand it. And if it's the way that F1 wants to go, then I'll accept it. But with the Halo, I see it as being, it potentially creates other issues. And I'll go back to the Massa incident, as I have done so many times before in different discussions. Massa's driving along, that spring is flying through the air, and it hit him in the helmet. Right? It was a horrible situation, and thank God he came through it. But if the halo's on the car and that spring hits the halo and goes down, what protection has his body got? None.
Yeah.
So there's more chance of it killing him than if it hits him on the head. And obviously hitting him on the head's not a good situation, but it's better than it hitting a halo and going down. Now, it's all well and good wanting to stop wheels. If you want to stop the wheels, make better tethers.
But like Max Verstappen said, is the amount of development that's gone into wheel tethers this year, and you've seen it plenty of times. The only other time you ever get a wheel that's loose on circuit is if the mechanics have not attached it correctly.
Yeah.
That should be where they go, right, that's the area where it's dangerous. I mean, probably, apart from what happened to Jules Bianchi, the last time I remember watching something with Formula 1 and going, that is dangerous, that is ridiculous, was 2011. No, not 2011. What year were we? Yeah, 2011, Canada, when Jenson Button won that race.
Yeah.
The marshals on track falling over.
Oh, God, yeah. 3 times it happened, wasn't it, in the race?
Yeah, it happened, and it was out of turn 3 heading towards turn 4. They were round a corner with walls either side. I remember, I think it was Kobayashi, which you do not want Kobayashi coming towards you. And the best of times comes round that corner, sees 3 marshals on circuit, 1 laying on the floor because he's just fallen over, and he locks up all 4 tyres and has to go onto the grass. I sat there and I just said, I sent to my dad and I said, this shouldn't happen.
No.
And Formula 1 shouldn't allow this to happen.
The thing's not.
But
It just looks like a joke. It looked like a comedy.
But it's the same though with the guy in Malaysia that was on the circuit, not Malaysia, Singapore.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ran across
Just
the track.
wandered onto the circuit. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So, no, there was 2. There was one during the race that wandered across the circuit, and he was walking down one of the bridges. But also,
Singapore.
Singapore
walking down circuit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the year after, there were a lizard, weren't there?
Yeah.
A lizard,
You see, now those kind of things, that shouldn't happen. Now, not many people know that, unfortunately, there was a marshal, and I do apologise, I can't remember where it was, or when it was. I know it was in recent years, the last 2 or 3 years. It might even have been the same year as Bianchi had his crash. But there was a marshal who unfortunately lost his life. Right?
Yeah,
And
that was at Canada, wasn't it?
It might have been. A car was being recovered. I think he fell over and he was run over by the JCB. And unfortunately, he didn't survive. That is a freak accident, and there's not a lot you can do to avoid that other than don't walk or fall in front of a JCB. But sometimes, while recovering a car, accidents. I mean, I must admit, since knowing that, I've seen a lot of races and thinking that marshal don't want to be walking in front of that JCB, because all it takes is one slip, and we've seen it from marshals on track. One slip, and that's a problem. But those situations of marshals falling over on the racetrack, it's in a rush to get off the track that's created them to fall over, and it is horrifying. And they're things that could be controlled better. And that, in many ways, is where the virtual safety car should come into its own a lot more. Because if you're in a situation where you've got marshals that are potentially going to have to run to get out of the way, then bring that virtual safety car out. And the virtual safety car can be more useful than the safety car, because under the safety car, drivers are still going to be driving under VSC, everybody's at a limited speed, right? Under safety car, the guys right behind the safety car are at a limited speed, but those guys that have pitted or need to catch up, they're going to be going at a higher speed. But not only that, your field it's a much more spread at different rates of speed. So once everyone's behind the safety car, okay, the marshals know, all right, the field has gone past, we've got 2 minutes. But it's not like that when they're all around the racetrack.
I think, but that's something off track that's not related to cars and drivers dying. That's related to just in running a racetrack. I think the last time I saw something which was related to a car other than Jules Bianchi going under that JCB was the wheel in Hungary 2013 with Webber bouncing down the pit lane and smacking the cameraman on the back.
Yeah.
Even watching that, I thought, no, and then it happened, and it was one of them where it was quite scary.
There's something then, right? When you've been watching Formula E, if you have watched it, they have a minimum pit stop time, so that they don't rush changing from one car to the next and making sure that the driver is secured to the car. So in Formula 1, with the pressure of pit stops trying to be less than 2 seconds or very low 2-second pit stops, shouldn't there be a minimum pit stop time so that it makes the teams, say for instance, check the wheels twice? So they lock them, the wheels are on, done, but then another guy comes along with a wheel wrench or whatever just to check that it's locked in place.
Is he smoking a fag while carrying a refill can? But
do you know what I mean?
You know what? From a safety aspect, you're right. It would work, right?
Yeah.
Not a single team would go for it, because those fractions of a second is what gains them or loses them a position. And whether it be right or wrong, I think that'd kind of need to stay. But I mean,
but in that fundamental about Formula 1, just look at it, going the teams think we can gain a position in the pit stops.
I mean,
rather than let's make a car that can overtake.
Yeah. I mean, okay. If Steve's idea was put into effect, then it would make the teams have to do it on the. And I mean, I do think the overtaking should happen on the track. It shouldn't happen in the pit stops. So I mean, maybe it would work. Maybe it would be a feature that would force the teams to do more on the track. I mean, okay. Let's say, for example, your driver, you got Vettel behind Hamilton, right? Hamilton pits. Vettel knows that he has either got to go and do a couple of laps faster than what Hamilton is going to be able to do because the pit stop's going to be the same length of time, or he's got to follow him in and hope he's quicker afterwards. It's down to what the guy on the track does. Now, you could say, well, that's the situation now. Well, yes and no. It's down to what the guy on the track does, but it's also down to what the team in the pits do. And if it comes down to... I know... Red Bull were fined massively for that wheel that hit the cameraman, but unless the fine is championship points or disqualification, there's always that risk of that could happen. So it's an interesting one.
But if the wheels are secured to the car and they can't come off, does that mean then that we don't need the halo?
The argument there would be that yes, you still need the halo to protect from anything else, the risk factor. I mean, okay, as good as tethers can be made, there's always going to be that minor possibility that a wheel could still end up off a car. Or, for example, two cars are heading towards a barrier and hit the barrier. I mean, okay, let's say, for example, two cars go off at Eau Rouge together, a bit like Magnussen did last year in his Renault.
A bit like Paul and RDB.
Yeah, a bit like those two did. So, but there's two of them heading to the barrier. One of them hits the barrier so hard that when he comes down, the other car's right there. The halo would protect the second driver from any dangling wheel or the car or debris or anything like that. But I can understand them wanting to go down the route of we want to try and protect the driver. Personally, I think the aero-style cockpit, the windscreen, looks so much better, but I do know that drivers have been struggling with visibility with that, which obviously creates a problem. I don't think the full cockpit cover would ever work because that's even worse. Go to the Alonso situation at Australia, full cockpit, 100% he's not getting out of that. So that's not going to happen, I don't think.
One thing I've thought, just from looking at the cockpit design, do you remember Senna's McLaren had a bit of a window screen? But
I was driving it today, yeah.
It didn't cover the entire head. But what if the aero screen, let's say that they did some work with, probably this never happened because it's too genius.
James thinks he's a genius, right? Get ready for this, folks.
Why not F1 get in touch with the American Air Force or the RAF and say, right, what do your fighter pilots use? And because you couldn't have fighter pilots up in the air going supersonic speeds and going, oh, my visibility is too bad.
That's
so.
Well, I think they are helped. I mean, with the visibility, I think water on the windscreen was one of the difficulties with visibility. But when you're in a fighter jet doing 500 mile an hour, water's not a problem. It gets blasted off the screen. But it's a good point. I do think the FIA, it may not have been the FIA, I do think that cockpit designers of jets were involved with initial tests of the cockpit cover. Because they were using jet fighter style windscreens. So I think they went to the relevant people. And I do think that they worked, but again, it's the problem of if you've got an enclosed cockpit, then you can't get it open. And I think one of the problems with the windscreen was when it rained, the water was pushed up, but then it's where it goes after that as well. I mean, otherwise, if drivers can have helmets that have got filaments to stop them from misting up, I'm sure they could do something with a windscreen. Just put a wiper on it, it'll be fine.
The thought I had was the canopy design, but where the steering wheel is, that's where the canopy stops. So it goes from the tip of the nose to the steering wheel is the nose cone and canopy. And then it stops. So the driver is still able to jump out.
It's an interesting one.
If it goes upside down, it's still able to get out.
Okay.
Because there's no above the red and round the red. But the head in a full-on forward collision is fully protected.
Have you ever seen... it's not Speed, I'm not talking about the film, jet boat racers.
Yeah, because they've got a monocoque that ejects them from the...
Yeah. Now, I was thinking about this the other day. Now, it wouldn't work, but it's what I was thinking about, right? Basically, if these jet boats crash, the whole cockpit, it basically is ejected from the wreckage. And it's almost like a jet fighter style cockpit. It can be opened up, even if it's rolled over. It's easy to. It's basically
it's buoyant as well, so it floats.
Buoyant. It's a survival cell. So if there's a crash, there's the survival cell, and the drivers they can't tend to actually, especially in a crash situation, can't get themselves out of it. And it made me think that might work in Formula One, but then I was like, no, don't be stupid. I've seen those jet boat crashes, and those cockpits go miles when there's a crash, and quite often the drivers end up with broken legs, broken arms. They end up hurt, but they, from what I know, most of the time survive. The problem is if that kind of thing was in F1, when there's a big impact, the cockpit's still going to want to go somewhere, and it's probably going to end up in the crowd. But if they could make it where there was the survival cell that they could extract, so if a car is upside down and it's on fire, it's not a problem because the survival cell will keep the driver alive. But unfortunately, I don't think that work.
I mean, you look at NASA and they've got like. For re-entering the atmosphere, they've got like a heat shield and stuff like that. I mean, if the survival cell was so good that even if the car turned upside down and they were enclosed in the cockpit and the car set alight, the driver would still just sit there and just wait for the marshals to run over with
put them out.
Fire extinguishers.
Yeah.
But also, you could have it where the survival cell, so to speak, if the car is upside down, you can attach a crane to it and take the survival cell out from underneath the car.
Yeah.
I know what we should do. Maldonado, ejectocito. Just imagine that, driving down to the first corner at Spain, and on the radio you hear the driver go, "What's this button do?" as he's flying off into the sky.
Ejectocito.
But I mean, this is the thing though. I mean, I've seen it from so many F1 shows as well, that there's a lot of people that have ideas, and I mean, okay, you could question what I'm about to say, but if the most intelligent people are working at the problem and struggling to come up with a better idea than the halo, you either have to ask, A, are they the most intelligent people and the best people to be looking at it, or B, is it really actually the best solution? I think from a fan's perspective, a lot of people would say, you know what, I can understand it, but I don't want it. And
well, I've been looking at this and thinking, next year's game, the F1 2018, if that's got the halo on it, I'm not going to be wanting to drive on a game with the halo where it's impeding my view.
Well, I mean,
especially because I raised my seat position, my angle up a bit, so that I can see a little bit more of the track ahead of me. If I do that, the halo's going to be even more in the way.
That's when your daughters are going to come along and go, "Daddy, why has your car got a pair of Y fronts on it?" Because that's what it will look like. I mean, I was going to ask that. I mean, okay, from a gamer point of view, and this goes back to the realism realism, but actually we don't like it, or we do like. If Halo does come in, should the game have it? Because I don't think it should. Well, technically, for realism, yes, it should, but I actually don't think it needs it.
It should, but you should have the option to remove it.
I think it should have it because it'll make people realise how ugly it is if they haven't watched the sport on TV. But just one thing I was just thinking then is when you've got something close to you, but yet you're looking beyond it, your focus changes.
Yeah.
And this is just a tip for Codemasters if they still have the license. It needs to be so that even if you're sat in cockpit view, that it's there, but it's sort
You
of
don't see it.
You see it, but you don't see it.
Yeah,
it's a little there, but it's
a
not
little bit like
there.
I know I've done this, and I know I've done it to Steve, and Steve's done it to me, and we've done it to other people, right? When you drive on cockpit view, and you can drive along, and you'd be perfectly happy, and you'd be, well, maybe not perfectly happy, but you'd be driving along, no problem, until someone says these evil words, and that is, have you seen the aerials on the car in front of you? Because as soon as someone says that, all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, and then you can't not see them. And every time you drive, your eyes pick them up, and that's exactly what your focus grabs that instead of being able to look beyond.
Well, when I was looking at what car or what team to race with in my career mode on the current game, first thing I did was go onto time trial and go in all the different cars to look how big the aerials were on the front of the car to see which one obscured my view the most. And I looked at the Red Bull and thought, fuck that, because it was massive. So I've ended up with a Renault because it's got a clear bonnet, a clear nose.
Yeah, and that's the fundamentals of just. Yeah, great Codemasters. We've got all these features. Look, we've even got classic cars. Amazing, aren't we? Amazing. Fuck me. But really, just the basics of making an aerial when you get in up to high speed, getting the aerial to go out of focus and hardly become visible, and then like in a slow speed corner, it becomes a bit more. Just little things like that. It's not a lot we're asking for, but it's just something where. You go, well, it don't matter what car I'm in, it's going to, you know what I mean?
Well, the one on the Williams...
Right, hang on. It's a little bit like sex. Yeah, you can all just go at it, hell for leather, and have sex. But it's those little details. It's that little bit of foreplay that makes it that little bit more special.
Yep.
James is
on the
giggling,
Williams,
he's trying to laugh quietly. It's not working.
On the Williams, the aerial's really flexible. So the faster you go, the more it wobbles around.
I wonder who else just
really
made a sexual reference in their mind to a flexible aerial.
Yeah.
And,
I thought Williams was code word there.
But no, I mean, the Halo is a discussion that I think will go on until it comes out. I mean, okay, teams will be able to make it look better and look sexy, and it'll be plastered with. Well, it might not be plastered with sponsors because, I mean, if it fails, what sponsor's going to want their name on it? That'd be worse than having an engine blow up. But anyway, there we go. Just to let my co-host know, we've been at this for 3 hours now. So I think it's probably time we brought this pilot show to an end, really. We've probably talked a lot more about stuff than we were planning on doing, but I think it's been quite an interesting chat. It's perhaps not been as hilarious as we may have expected it to be, but with it being the first one, we've perhaps controlled ourselves a little bit. We'll have to see what future shows bring. Well, guys, your thoughts on this evening's chat?
Yeah, well, it's been long, but
give me the mic.
But I think it's been needed. These little frustrations, something that just goes on in my head, and I don't usually vent these frustrations. They usually just whiz round in my head. So it's been good to get them out there, and it's good to get people that are watching, hopefully feeling the same and getting in touch.
Yeah, I was just about to mention actually that if people are listening to this after it's live, so in other words, on another day, and they want to put in a comment down in the comments, we will get around to reading them, and might give us some ideas for future podcast.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that I will mention as well is that obviously, I mean, James has mentioned there about getting the frustrations out, and I just want to mention that it's not just an F1 podcast that we're doing. It is an F1 based podcast. I nearly said codpast. There's a whole new style of cod piece that is. Yeah, I mean, there are times where we're going to talk about anything else, or almost anything else, and it could be things that people are going through in their lives or different situations. I mean, I've got one of my secret things. I actually wanted to mention this earlier, but we've gone on quite a while. So, but it's so away from Formula One that it's got absolutely nothing to do with Formula One. But that's the whole point of those parts of it. That's why we come to the show with 3 F1 topics each that were open for a discussion, but 3 secret things that are nothing to do with Formula One that could be about absolutely anything. And we welcome viewers to send us questions related to F1, or even nothing to do with F1. It could be, what is your favourite TV show? It could be, what did you have for dinner last night? It could be any of those kind of things. And some things may be off topic for us, so that we might not discuss, but you never know, some stuff we might. But also, I mean, I'll be interested to see what these guys might come up with for, I'll tell you what, that's cool, next time out. So guys, next F1 race is Monza this weekend, I believe. So, does that mean then that we're going to be live next Tuesday on the I'll Tell You What TV YouTube channel?
I think we need to be.
Yep. We need to talk about KUBICA's return to Formula One.
We need to talk about Alonso parking the car because the engine's like a GP3 engine at Monza.
GP3.
But the thing is, imagine how much fun it would be to see the likes of Alonso in a GP2 race.
That's very true.
Just imagine how fun it'd be to watch Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Raikkonen's thereabouts. But just imagine them all up at the front in Ferraris and Mercedes. Maybe not in them particular cars, but in cars that are as competitive as them. Imagine that.
Well, I do know Brundle had the... This is what happens with us, by the way. We get ready to say see you later. We end up carrying on talking. I do know that Brundle had the idea, and I think it was triggered by Austria a couple of seasons ago. Because when... oh my God, I can't believe his name's gone from my mind. The Mercedes ambassador... Nicky Lauda. I can't believe I forgot Nicky Lauda.
Nicky, sorry, Nicky, if you listen.
Yeah, he won't be, but anyway. He could be sat on his plane watching this thinking, who are these idiots?
He's sat there going, this podcast is shit.
Nobody's flying my plane. Okay, when Nicky
this
Lauda...
podcast is shit, but I've been listening to it for 3 hours.
When Nicky Lauda was racing, right... Formula One used to allow their drivers to race in other series, their teams did, but also I believe the drivers arranged it to have pre-race races. So they'd race in the same classes of cars. And I saw it on Sky in Austria a couple of years ago, where Martin Brundle was talking to Nicky Lauda because they got a load of old F1 drivers to drive cars. I think it was the BMW M3, the one with the really pointy nose. They got a load of them at the moment to do something like, for example, we're at Monza this weekend, so we have an exhibition race. The same Ferrari car, whether it be road car or race cars, like F430s or something like that, and go and have an exhibition race for fun. They're all in the same sort of car, no setup work, just go and have a bit of a practice session and go and have a race. Now, chances are they're going to wreck them. And it's going to cost a bit of money. But I know I'd watch that.
The revenue from just watching each one.
Yeah, but then you've got Mercedes who are saying we can't allow our driver to drive a Ferrari. Well, that's all right, because when F1 ever comes back to Germany, they can race in Mercs. And when they're at Silverstone, they can race in Jaguars or Ford Escorts or Minis. But they could do that kind of thing. Each event or selected events throughout the year have a same make,
Yeah, you get to Red Bull Ring, and they're all in Aston Martins going round circuit.
I would have said
So
the world
Monaco,
on the back of those fake bulls you get in dodgy wine bars, booking Broncos down to turn one.
So
But
Monaco,
even
they'll be in Renault Clios.
Yeah, could be. Gee-whizzes.
Yeah, but that's it. I mean, you could get one of each team and their main title sponsor, if they're not a car manufacturer, to
Livery the
go
car.
with the maybe then I don't know, maybe their current engine supplier. So let's say, for example, Force India, they get a load of pink Mercedes, and there could be different Mercedes, could be on DTMs. But I would pay an extra £10 on top of my Sky subscription to watch that.
Yeah.
But what about this as an idea, though, right? Because the drivers are in the car and you're just going to see a lot of similar cars, why not have the cars sprayed up in the style of their crash helmets?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. You could have that. You got the crash helmet design on it. So, for example, you got Alonso with Spanish flag and yellow and blue.
I reckon you go down the old, you might not know this, James, the old Gino's Pizza route. They have a big light on the top of the Gino's Pizza delivery used to have a giant telephone on the top of the car that lit up, and if you were good boys, you'd ask your mum to make sure they delivered with that car because you knew it was there. But yeah, I mean, they could do anything with the car so that you knew it was Vettel, you knew it was Hamilton.
Yeah.
And you could have people like Nico Rosberg comes back for a race and that kind of stuff. But the only problem, I mean, I would pay extra money to watch that kind of stuff. Right? I really, really would, because it'd be brilliant. The downside is you got situations like happened with the Race of Champions. The Race of Champions is a great, fun event. But Pascal Wehrlein missed races this season because of an injury he suffered at the Race of Champions, and that's the concern for the teams, that in those kind of events someone could get hurt.
But we have mentioned during this that we're frustrated that there's young up and coming talent that's not getting a chance. Now, I'm not saying I want to see drivers doing these support races and end up breaking a leg, but each one of them little opportunities is giving somebody else an opportunity.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of Formula One, you've got drivers hanging around who they should have gone. I mean, and you've got drivers there that are just there with money.
Yeah. I fully agree with what you're saying, right? And over the course of the last few years, we've seen reserve drivers be given the car for an FP1 session, right? I can understand it, and in some ways I think, great. Another situation, on the flip side, I think, what the hell? You shouldn't be doing that. Now, De Resta was one of those guys who, when he was at Force India, I think he was there as a reserve, he had a few FP1 sessions. And it was good for him, but it affected the guy whose car he took. And that still happens now. If you've got an F1 driver sitting on the pit wall in FP1 while some youngster is driving his car around the track, what's he learning? In preparation for the race, nothing. He should be in the car. I just went a little bit Liverpool-y then. Nothing.
Nothing.
The driver should be in the car. But at the same time, it's the only way that people are really going to get a proper opportunity to have a go. And I think that's kind of wrong, and that's where I think F1 needs to be able to provide those additional opportunities for the younger drivers.
But you could even get, for example, like what you do with press conference. You don't get every Formula 1 driver, but you could go, right, let's go with 5 current Formula 1 drivers to do this support race up against all the young junior drivers that want a Formula 1 seat. So the teams are then watching going, bloody hell, he's our lad and he's up against Hamilton and he's right up his arse. Yeah. We need to get him in a seat next season because bloody hell, look at the skill he's got. He's in the identical car.
You know what would happen though? It would end up with I wonder who did have to start painting the underside of the cars, because at some point it'd be like, I'm not sure who that is because they're upside down in the gravel trap. I think it may have been a youngster who was a little bit too eager.
Yeah,
there we go.
but just, I mean, I think it's when we have these conversations that we just hope that Liberty Media may be listening to us somewhere,
you dream
maybe
big, James.
getting
you
employed.
Dream big.
Well, we've got to start somewhere, and I think this outlet may be our ticket to providing help for Liberty Media. And if you're listening, Ross Braun, please give us a job, and we'll.
They would take one look at our pictures and go, that guy in the middle, no. That guy on the right, no. That guy on the left, he's got a Terminator eye while wearing shades, so he's a no. But I will say, I look absolutely nothing like my picture on at the moment. I look like... I'm trying to think what his name is now.
Well, look at my
picture. Nesbitt.
No.
Look at my picture and add on about 8 stone.
I look like a fat Joe Wilkinson at the moment. And if you don't know who Joe Wilkinson is, you'll have to Google him. But that's what I can't. I mean, James, you said you're a bit bearded at the moment. Probably not as much as me. On it, trust. Yeah. So we might have to update the pictures to. This is us on a good day, and this is what we really look like. But anyway. Okay, I think it's going to be time to sort of bring this to an end, because we said we're trying to do that about 15 minutes ago. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting chat, and it'll be interesting to see what we come up with to talk about next week after the Monza Grand Prix. Obviously, there's going to be a few things from that race that we'll have to talk about, I'm sure. But we also, I know I've got a few topics in the bag, so to speak, to still bring up, and obviously we've still got the secret topics that would be very interesting to see what comes up. I mean, James you said you don't really thought much about those. I know Steve's got a list and I've got a list, so we've been thinking about those, that's for sure. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. So anyway, for anyone that's been listening in, obviously it is a podcast. There's not too much to watch on the screen, but at times I have popped up a few bits of information, and as the shows go on, I may be able to introduce different things for you to see on the screen, but obviously it is mainly a podcast. The next show we will do on the I'll Tell You What TV YouTube channel. There is a link in the description of this video, which is on my own YouTube channel. Unless you're watching this on the I'll Tell You What YouTube channel, because I will upload it there as well. So yeah, come and find us on that. The link's in the description, as I mentioned, and we'll come on live next Tuesday and see what we've got to chat about then.
Also, to just jump in.
Yes, James, go ahead.
If you do like us podcast and you think that there may be somebody on Facebook or something like that may appreciate what we're doing here, please share that link and tell them to subscribe.
Yeah, I've popping up the like and subscribe for new notifications of new live shows. Obviously, if you subscribe to my own personal YouTube channel, you won't get notifications of the new live shows, but that's why the link is in the description for the I'll Tell You What TV YouTube channel, and you can come and join us on that. We will be live on that next week. So Steve, James had plenty of opportunities. I tried to get James to say see you later 15 minutes ago. It's taken 15 minutes. So Steve, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts is James going to say see you later.
I'm a bit tired now.
I'm hungry. I've not had no dinner yet.
I'm eating Cocoa Pops as I'm speaking. So.
Oh, I can just imagine it tomorrow. I'll shit myself, guys. It came out like Cocoa Pops. It turned the milk chocolatey.
Dry, no milk. Yeah, all I can say is, well, it just shows we've got plenty to talk about. We've only had 3 topics each, and 3 hours later, we're still here or more.
Yeah, join us for some more next week.
Oh, aye. There'll be plenty more.
Alright. Okay, for those of you that have been listening, thank you very much. Obviously, share the link, and you can join us live next Tuesday, or you can join us at your leisure once the video is the live stream has ended. I'm just going to quickly show the format again, and then we'll go to a bit of an outro, and that'll be all from us this evening. So thank you very much for joining the I'll Tell You What TV podcast. And yes, we know the ironicacy of that comment. How can you have a podcast on the TV? But there you go. You're going to watch it on your smartphone anyway. But yeah, thank you very much for joining. And well, hope you enjoyed listening into us three Muppets talk about F1 and the last time you shit yourself. So thanks for watching. And we'll see you all again soon. Say goodbye.
Adios.
The format of the show, well, it's an F1 based podcast discussing many things Formula 1, and we each come to the show with 3 F1 based topics to discuss, plus 3 secret non-F1 topics to discuss where almost anything goes. Viewers can ask questions live or by sending questions to us via YouTube, email or Facebook, and a little warning that there may be swearing and bad language on the shows.
Blah 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 blah.